Chapter 1455. Challenge. The cold light was too fast. The 5 disciples didn't even have time to react. 5 arms flew into the sky, blood splattering everywhere. Wu Zhirong's expression changed drastically. Her beautiful eyes flashed coldly as she said, "Who is it? How dare you be so presumptuous?" The Saint Martial sect is the ruler of the martial dark realm. Is everyone so unreasonable? They don't even give us the right to talk? An unhurried voice was slowly transmitted over. Immediately, a tall and straight figure walked over from a corner of the restaurant. Everyone looked over and saw an honest-looking young man slowly walking over with a smile on his face. "Who are you? How dare you meddle in the business of the Saint Martial sect?" Wu Zhirong's beautiful eyes were filled with hostility. However, she didn't dare to act rashly. This young man was able to cut off the right arm of the 5 disciples in an instant. His strength was far beyond the average high-level martial emperor realm. The others in the restaurant also looked curiously at the ordinary-looking young man in front of them. They whispered to each other, "It's not that I want to meddle in the business of the Saint Martial sect. It's just that you guys have crossed the line." Zhuowen smiled and said indifferently, "Cross the line? The Saint Martial city was built by the Saint Martial sect. In this place, the Saint Martial sect is above everyone else. In this place, the Saint Martial sect is the sky. Who dares to go against us?" Wu Zhirong raised her head and puffed out her chest. Her beautiful eyes flashed with arrogance. With a colossus like the Saint Martial sect, and her status as the daughter of a martial marquis, who dared to disobey her? Many cultivators in the restaurant were in an uproar. However, none of them dared to say anything. After all, Wu Zhirong was the daughter of a martial marquis. Who would dare to offend her? Slap. The clear sound of a slap resounded just as his voice faded. Soon after, the entire restaurant descended into silence. Wu Zhirong was holding her swollen hand as she stared blankly at the young man in front of her. After a short moment of shock, Wu Zhirong suddenly screamed and waved her hand. The silver soft whip was like a silver snake as it swept towards Zhuowen's vitals. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed. He grabbed the silver soft whip with his right hand. What? Wu Zhirong was shocked. The silver soft whip was a high-level martial emperor weapon. It was powerful. How could this person grab at martial emperor with his bare hands? Slap. Zhuowen couldn't be bothered to pay attention to Wu Zhirong, who had sunk into madness. He turned his hand and slapped her again. Another crisp slap resounded. The terrifying strength of the slap almost made Wu Zhirong dizzy. Her mind was somewhat muddled. The restaurant was extremely quiet. Everyone looked at the young man in front of them with strange gazes. This kid was really daring. He was so unbridled in the martial saint city, slapping the daughter of a martial marquis. Wu Zhirong, bastard, let Miss Wu. The Saint Martial marquis. Martial marquis to Wu to martial marquis, to martial to God to marquis. As for the other girl at the table, she was so scared that she didn't know what to do. She just stood there in a daze, not knowing what to do. "Who are you? What do you want?" Wu Zhirong suppressed her voice. She sounded like she was about to cry. She was Marquis's daughter. No one had dared to hit her since she was young. She felt wronged. Although she wanted nothing more than to tear this damnable fellow to shreds, she also knew that it was of no use at all. This kid's strength was too strong. "Nothing much. My name is Zhuowen. I'm a wild crane in martial nether realm. I've been in seclusion for dozens of years. I heard that Marquis's son, Wu Zhantian, is the #1 genius in martial nether realm." "I don't agree," Zhuowen said. The crowd was in an uproar. Zhuowen's words were obvious. He didn't agree that Wu Zhantian was the #1 genius in martial nether realm. At the same time, he pointed out that he was a hidden martial artist in martial nether realm. Hidden martial artists existed in every martial nether realm. Most of them didn't want to be involved in the conflicts of the mortal world. They wanted to develop their forces in peace. However, being low-key didn't mean that they were weak. They just didn't show it. Thinking of this, many of the surrounding martial artists understood that the reason why this young man was so calm was probably because the hidden force behind him wasn't weak. "What do you mean? Do you want to challenge my big brother?" Wu Zhirong asked strangely. "Why not?" Shouldn't the title of the number one genius be given to the strongest? I'm about the same age as Wu Zhantian, and I'm also quite strong. If I challenge Wu Zhantian and defeat him, the number one genius title should belong to me, Zhuowen said arrogantly. Many of the surrounding martial artists had strange looks on their faces. Although this young man looked unfathomable, there was still a gap between him and Wu Zhantian. Wu Zhantian was the son of Marquis, and the strongest genius in Saint Martial's sect. His strength was much more terrifying than Song Xian's. It was said that he was infinitely close to becoming a profound sage. Ordinary profound sages couldn't kill Wu Zhantian. From this, it could be seen how terrifying Wu Zhantian was. To be able to escape from a sage without entering the sage realm, one must have heaven-defying strength. Wu Zhirong was startled. She smiled contemptuously and said, "Are you dreaming? My big brother's strength is comparable to an ordinary profound sage. Who do you think you are? You dare to challenge him? The ignorant are truly fearless." Slap. Zhuowen didn't hold back and slapped Wu Zhirong again. He said indifferently, "Do I need you to tell me who I am? If you don't want to be slapped, I think you'd better think before you speak." The crisp sound of the slap attracted the attention of many people. Especially when they saw Wu Zhirong's bulging face, the corners of their eyes twitched. But even more people were secretly giving her a thumbs up. Wu Zhirong relied on her status as the daughter of Marquis, and could be described as unruly and domineering in Saint Martial City. Many people in Saint Martial City couldn't stand this woman. If it weren't for Saint Martial sect, someone would have already come out to slap her. Wu Zhirong didn't dare to speak carelessly anymore. She silently lowered her head, but her beautiful eyes flashed with resentment. Today, she was slapped in front of everyone. To her, it was an indescribable humiliation. "Since you approve of your big brother, Wu Zhantian, then let's do it this way. Call him out and compete with him. I want to see if his title as the number one genius is worthy of it." Zhuowen stood proudly. His eyes emitted an intense light that couldn't be looked at directly. This kid actually wants to challenge Wu Zhantian. His courage is commendable. Although Wu Zhantian hasn't entered the profound sage realm, his strength is exceptionally terrifying. Everyone was shocked. Wu Zhantian's name shook the entire martial nether realm. Few people didn't know him. Furthermore, this kid was indeed from Saint Martial sect. He was the number one genius of martial nether realm. It could even be said that Wu Zhantian's fame in the Nine Nether Realm was similar to Mo when in the Desolate Nether Realm. Although the two hadn't fought before, they were often compared. Of course, other than these two, the number one geniuses of other nether realms were also extremely terrifying. For example, Yang Yi of the Divine Nether Realm gave people the feeling that he was unfathomable. Zhuowen didn't care about the discussions around him. Instead, he carried Wu Zhirong out of the restaurant and walked towards Saint Martial's sect in the center of Saint Martial City. There's a good show to watch. Looks like this kid is really going to challenge Wu Zhantian and the entire Saint Martial sect. Zhuowen's action immediately attracted the attention of many martial artists. They all followed behind him. Not good. This Hewan is too daring. He actually dares to look down on our Saint Martial sect, and even carry Miss Wu like this. The 5 male disciples who had their arms cut off had already stopped the bleeding. Seeing Wu Zhirong being carried away, their faces changed, and they all followed behind. In the huge square in front of Saint Martial sect, Zhuowen carried Wu Zhirong openly and walked to the square unhurriedly. Isn't this the daughter of Marquis Wu Zhirong? Why is she being carried like this? Who is this kid? How dare he be so disrespectful to Marquis Wu's daughter? Is he tired of living? There were many people in the square. When Zhuowen arrived, he immediately became the focus of everyone's attention. After all, Zhuowen was carrying Wu Zhirong, a well-known character. How dare he? How dare he be so disrespectful to Miss Wu? Soon, a group of people wearing Saint Martial sect's uniform came to the square. The leader was a man in his 30s. He came with an aggressive aura. Especially when he saw Wu Zhirong in Zhuowen's hand, he was even more furious. He took a step forward and swung the long spear in his hand. It was like an arrow leaving the bow, aiming for Zhuowen's vitals. The man followed closely behind. His emperor's aura of the 8th level martial emperor realm came crashing down. Many people in the square looked at him in awe. Boom! Zhuowen threw out a punch, and the long spear exploded. Then, without changing the momentum of his punch, he smashed the man's arm. Kacha! The sound of bones cracking was heard. The man screamed in pain. His right hand was distorted and flew out, crashing onto the ground. An 8th level martial emperor realm expert killed in one move. Many martial artists in the square were stunned by this scene. Many of them couldn't even react. My target today is Wu Zhantian. My name is He1. I came from the secluded place of the martial nether realm. I just came out of seclusion not long ago. I heard that the #1 genius of the martial nether realm is called Wu Zhantian, and he seems to be quite famous. So, I'm here to see if this Wu Zhantian is worthy of his name. Zhuowen leaped up and floated above the square. A powerful saint's aura spread out, causing the whole square to stagnate for a moment. What a powerful aura. This kid is also a half-step saint. He's so young, but he's already a half-step saint. No wonder he wants to challenge Wu Zhantian. I didn't expect that the secluded forces could cultivate such a genius. It's really a coincidence. I just don't know how big of a chance this kid has compared to Wu Zhantian. I'm afraid his chance of winning is not high. Wu Zhantian is said to have mastered 3 types of law power. He's a rare genius of the Saint Martial sect. Wu Ho has poured countless blood to cultivate him. His combat strength is extremely terrifying. This young man can't compare to him. Chapter 1456. Life and death determined. What's going on? What happened at the sacred martial square? Suddenly, a majestic voice came from the front of the square. Immediately after, an old man in a long robe with mottled hair and beard walked out of the crowd. The old man's aura was extremely vast, and a saint aura that was even stronger than Zhuowen's spread out. Like a mountain, it rumbled towards Zhuowen. Zhuowen's pupil shrank and he coldly snorted, but he was not afraid. The 2 saint auras collided, setting off a terrifying hurricane in the sky above the square. Interesting. To be able to reach the half-step saint realm at such a young age, that's not bad. The old man raised his eyebrows and said with a slightly gloomy face, but the biggest mistake you've made now is to offend my sacred martial sect, and even injure that girl Zhirong. Speaking up to hear, the old man's eyes flashed with killing intent, and the saint aura in his body became even more terrifying. It surged out like countless mountains were pressing down. Boom! Zhuowen punched the air and retreated a few steps. Only then was he able to block the terrifying saint might. Avoid Saint Realm Saint? Squinting his eyes, Zhuowen looked at the old man in front of him with some surprise. It seemed that although the sacred martial sect was not as powerful as the excellent Divine Institute, it could not be underestimated. Other than Wu Ho, there was also a saint in the sect. Of course, the old man in front of him was only a Void Saint Realm Saint, the first of the 5 profound saints. He had just entered the profound saint realm. If Zhuowen directly used his saint body, this old man might not be his opponent. However, Zhuowen's target this time was Wu Zhantian. Without a doubt, Wu Zhantian's potential was much greater than this old man's. In the future, his cultivation would very likely surpass Wu Ho's. In addition, Wu Zhantian was Wu Ho's son. If he killed Wu Zhantian, Wu Ho would feel the real pain. You actually blocked this old man's saint aura. Not bad. The old man squinted his eyes and said with some surprise. Whoosh! Wu Zhirong flashed to the old man's side and glared at Zhuowen fiercely. Great Elder, this brat is too audacious. He doesn't even put our Saint Martial sect in his eyes. What's more hateful is that this guy even hit me. After entering the square, Zhuowen released Wu Zhirong. Although Zhuowen really wanted to kill Wu Zhirong, this was the headquarters of the Saint Martial sect, and his target was Wu Zhantian. Naturally, he couldn't escalate the conflict immediately. The old man's gaze was somewhat unfriendly. He stared coldly at Zhuowen and said, "You are from the hidden faction of the Martial Nether Realm? What's your name?" "Congratulations." Zhuowen replied indifferently and continued, "I've always heard of how impressive and powerful that Wu Zhantian is. In the Martial Nether Realm, he is an invincible existence among the younger generation. Today, Hewan would like to seek advice from that Wu Zhantian. Of course, if that Wu Zhantian doesn't dare to accept the challenge and wants to be a coward, or if your Saint Martial sect wants to bully him with numbers, then just pretend that I didn't say anything. As soon as these words came out, the entire square was in an uproar. Everyone stared at the great elder at the end of the square with great interest. Wu Zhantian was extremely famous in the martial nether realm. It was said that when Wu Zhantian was an invincible emperor lord, he had challenged the Saint Martial sect's sage-to-be and defeated the sage-to-be. At that time, this matter had caused a sensation in the entire martial nether realm. It was also because of this matter that Wu Zhantian was crowned as the #1 genius of the younger generation. Later on, Wu Zhantian had advanced to the sage-to-be. Without a doubt, his strength was much more terrifying than the invincible emperor lord. The current Wu Zhantian's strength was already comparable to the experts of the older generation. How would the younger generation cultivators dare to challenge such an existence? But now a young genius from a hidden force had suddenly appeared. His cultivation had also reached the sage-to-be realm, and his battle strength was also extraordinary. Now that he had declared that he wanted to challenge Wu Zhantian, it naturally attracted the attention of many people in the square. Moreover, due to Zhuowen's insolent performance, the news of him challenging Wu Zhantian had spread throughout the Saint Martial city in a short period of time. Many cultivators in the city heard the news and gathered outside the square. They all wanted to see the true face of this young man, who dared to challenge Wu Zhantian. A brat who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. He actually wants to challenge my brother. Grand Elder, just kill this damned fellow, Wu Zhirong said with a sneer. What? Wu Zhantian is a coward, and now he wants the elders of the sect to be his shield? Is this the so-called #1 force of the martial nether realm, the Saint Martial sect? Zhuowen was not afraid and said indifferently. Wu Zhirong's pretty face changed slightly and said coldly, "Nothing good comes out of a dog's mouth. My brother is the #1 genius of the Saint Martial sect. He isn't someone that any random person can challenge. Do you have the qualifications?" Haha, look at your swollen cheeks. You say I don't have the qualifications? Zhuowen's eyes were filled with ridicule as he pointed at Wu Zhirong's swollen face. Instantly, the gazes of the surrounding cultivators, who had not been paying attention to Wu Zhirong, all gathered over. Soon after, many of them suppressed their laughter as they whispered to each other. Wu Zhirong was so angry that her body trembled, and her pretty face flushed red. She knew that Zhuowen's actions were definitely intentional. This made her gnash her teeth in hatred. The great elder frowned slightly, and his eyes emitted a cold light. However, he could not take action. After all, he was a saint of the Saint Martial sect, and this young man was just a junior. If he took action, it would undoubtedly be bullying the weak. Moreover, he disdained to take action against a cultivator who was not a saint. Moreover, the reason that this young man used was not inappropriate. After all, he was only here to challenge Wu Zhantian. Although his method was a little arrogant, the Saint Martial sect would not oppress him just because of this. After all, now that everyone was watching, the great elder naturally could not use underhanded means. Although this young man is also a half-step saint, and his aura is quite strong, compared to Zhantian, the gap is not small. Challenging Zhantian is courting death. The great elder's eyes flickered. He was very clear about Wu Zhantian's terrifying strength. If this young man in front of him fought against Wu Zhantian, his chances of winning would not be more than 30%. Thinking of this, the great elder took out a communication jade charm from his spiritual ring and sent a message to Wu Zhantian. He silently put it down and looked down at Zhuowen indifferently. Zhantian agrees to your challenge. He will be here soon. Hua. As soon as the great elder's words came out, the square was in an uproar. All the cultivators were extremely excited, and their eyes were filled with excitement. No one expected that Wu Zhantian would actually accept the challenge. Ever since Wu Zhantian's cultivation had broken through to the half-step saint, he had never been challenged again. The most recent time was a few years ago, when Wu Zhantian broke through to the invincible emperor realm, and took the initiative to challenge a half-step saint elder of the sect. That battle was extremely exciting and caused Wu Zhantian's reputation to soar. And the location of that battle was the sacred martial square. Zhuowen silently returned to the center of the square, the corner of his mouth revealing a smile. After a while, on the small path that led to the square inside the sacred martial sect, a tall figure walked step by step. The crisp sound of his footsteps reverberated in everyone's ears. This young man had thick eyebrows and a high nose. His eyes were as bright as silver stars. He had a medium build, and his limbs were strong and powerful. At first glance, he did not look like a dazzling figure. However, he inadvertently revealed a fierce and powerful aura, giving people a feeling that he was unshakable like Mount Tai. It's Wu Zhantian. He really came out to accept the challenge. When this young man finally appeared in the square, the surrounding people were in an uproar. Many people even had looks of admiration in their eyes. The battle that year had inspired many young cultivators of the sacred martial sect. Wu Zhantian was less than 30 years old, but his cultivation had already reached the terrifying height of a sage-to-be. Moreover, his combat strength was infinitely close to that of a sage-to-be. In the hearts of many young cultivators, he was a demon-like existence. When Wu Zhantian arrived at the square, his gaze suddenly fell on Zhuowen, who was in the center of the square. His sharp eyes were like a falcon's, bursting with a blazing radiance, like a lighthouse on the sea at night. Wu Zhantian's gaze only lingered on Zhuowen for 3 breaths of time. Then, he naturally turned around and walked steadily to the first elder's side. "Brother!" Wu Zhirong immediately came to Wu Zhantian's side. Her hands naturally wrapped around Wu Zhantian's right arm, a trace of grievance in her beautiful eyes. "Zhirong, your face?" Wu Zhantian's face was stunned. He stretched out his right hand and gently stroked Wu Zhirong's swollen face. A surge of power of law gushed out, and the latter's swollen face gradually recovered. "Brother, it's all that little bastard's fault. He actually slapped me. Ever since we were young, you and father have never done such a thing." Wu Zhirong complained in an exceptionally wrong tone. "Slapped you?" Wu Zhantian's gaze turned cold. A faint murderous intent suddenly burst out. In an instant, the entire square was filled with an extremely sharp murderous intent. This murderous intent was so cold that it could send chills down one's spine. "You've done well. You've slapped my sister. Now, you've come to the entrance of the sacred martial sect to clamor about challenging me. You're very arrogant and very arrogant." Wu Zhantian's gaze once again fell on Zhuowen as he spoke word by word. His voice was filled with a chilling murderous intent. "Today, you've come to challenge me. I, Wu Zhantian, accept. However, this battle shall be decided by the heavens." After saying that, Wu Zhantian leaped into the air and landed on the square. The moment Wu Zhantian landed on the ground, the whole square started to shake violently. An invisible ring-shaped airwave, with Wu Zhantian as the center, spread out in all directions. The martial artists nearby all retreated in horror. Life and death battle. Wu Zhantian actually wants to have a life and death battle. The surrounding martial artists were in an uproar. Everyone knew that Wu Zhantian was truly enraged. Usually a challenge would stop at a certain point. However, a life and death battle was different. Once the battle started, it would be a fight to the death. In a challenge, martial artists rarely used such an extreme method as a life and death battle. However, Wu Zhantian did so. Obviously, he was truly enraged this time. Will he accept this life and death battle? The surrounding martial artists' gazes fell on Zhuowen. Even the great elder revealed a smile as he looked at Zhuowen. Whether this young man in front of him accepted the life and death battle or not, he would not be able to leave the sacred martial sect alive today. Chapter 1457. Purple Snake Lightning Blade, you're quite brave. The first elder's eyes narrowed as he spoke. The smile on his face grew wider. Since he had accepted the life and death duel, there was no need for him to play any tricks behind his back, as he would die for sure. He really accepted the life and death duel. He is really brave. Once he loses, he'll die. Everyone in the square was stunned. They did not expect he to accept the life and death duel. Wu Zhantian licked his lips and revealed a cruel smile. Looks like you're quite confident in yourself. It's not about confidence, but your defeat is certain, Zhuowen said calmly. Wu Zhantian squinted his eyes and stomped his right foot on the ground. The ground of the square began to crack. He said loudly, "Everyone else, get out of the square. I won't be responsible if you're killed by the shockwaves." As soon as he said that, everyone in the square was stunned and left the square one after another. Since Wu Zhantian had spoken, everyone had no choice but to listen. After all, this was a battle between two half-saints. The shockwaves would be extremely terrifying. If one's cultivation was not high enough, they might die from the shockwaves. In an instant, the huge square became incomparably deserted. Only Zhuowen and Wu Zhantian were left facing each other from afar. At the same time, at the top of the central palace of the sacred martial sect, a tall figure slowly walked out and came to the platform. His sharp eyes pierced through the void and landed on the square. Someone actually dares to challenge Zhantian. How rare. However, this kid's talent is not bad. It's rare to see him reach the half-saint realm at such a young age. If Zhuowen was here, he would definitely recognize that the tall figure was none other than Wu Ho, one of the 6 sages who besieged the Azure Dragon Palace. However, Zhantian won't leave anyone alive. It's a pity for such a genius. Are the two of you ready? If you're ready, we can start now. The first elder stood at the edge of the square. His loud voice echoed throughout the square. Of course we're ready. Wu Zhantian licked his lips. He clenched his hand and took out a purple broadsword from his spiritual ring. The surface of the purple broadsword was surrounded by a dense purple aura. The aura transformed into purple pythons that flickered their tongues. They were lifelike, Li Studio. And there were purple bolts of thunder on the surface of the purple snake thunder broadsword, Advanced Emperor. After saying that, Wu Zhantian stomped his right foot on the ground and shot out like a bolt of lightning towards Zhuowen. Zhuowen quietly stood up and grabbed the tiger head clear gold spear with his right hand. Wu Zhantian's speed was extremely fast. In an instant, he appeared in front of Zhuowen and slashed out with his violet snake lightning blade. Boom! The purple lightning tore through the air and slashed at Zhuowen. It was like a huge purple snake that coiled around Zhuowen. Zhan as Zhan Studio Tianzhan Zhan Li Studio as Zhan Studio is too? Zhan Nan Zhan Clang. The sound of metal clashing resounded. The two weapons clashed together, and a terrifying energy burst out. Then it set off a violent wind. Wu Zhantian turned in the air. The purple snake thunder broadsword's momentum changed. Zhantian slashed at Zhantian's abdomen at a tricky and unbelievable angle. If Zhantian didn't dodge this slash, he would definitely be killed. The timing of this slash is so accurate. Ewan is going to be in a difficult situation. The slash was stunning. Even an outsider could feel the terrifying power of this slash. If they were in Wu Zhantian's shoes, they wouldn't be able to dodge it. Just when everyone thought that Zhuowen would end up in a sorry state under this attack, a powerful mental energy burst out from the center of his brows. 4-kill sword formation. Slaughter, slaughter, exterminate, and exterminate flew out from Zhuowen's spirit ring. A powerful killing force gushed out from the formation. At the same time, blood-red longswords appeared on the surface of the formation, blocking in front of Zhuowen. Ding! The thunder snake lightning blade struck the defense formed by the blood sword, and an ear-piercing explosion sounded. Spiritual power? No, that's not right. It's a mortal energy that's of a higher level than mental energy. So you're an arcana master. Wu Zhantian's eyes widened as he muttered in a low voice. Kill! Zhuowen did not pay attention to Wu Zhantian's words. With a twist of his right hand, the tiger head clear golden spear started to spin at a high speed. Whoosh! The long spear was like an electric drill, piercing towards Wu Zhantian's chest. At the same time, the 4-kill sword formation formed a powerful killing force that enveloped Wu Zhantian like a devouring dragon. Thunder! Wu Zhantian was extremely calm. Terrifying thunder surged out and surrounded his body. The terrifying thunder law gathered in the purple snake lightning blade, and Wu Zhantian slashed out. Rumble! Instantly, Countless purple snakes of lightning shot out from the lightning blade and spread out in all directions. They actually blocked the 4-kill sword formation and Zhuo Wen's lethal spear attack in one go. "Break for me," Wu Patian shouted as he threw out the purple snake lightning blade. Under the support of the Thunder Law, the power of the purple snake lightning blade increased to a terrifying level. Bang! The 4-kill sword formation was actually forced back by the purple snake lightning saber. The longswords contained in the formation diagram all dimmed. Clearly, they had suffered quite a bit of damage from this saber. Interesting. Zhuowen grinned and opened his fire eye. The fire law swept out, and his right hand touched the surface of the long spear. Suddenly, the surface of the long spear was ignited with a strong flame. Ding! The fire spear and the lightning blade collided with each other. Thunder and sparks splashed out, forming a dazzling brilliance like fireworks. The two separated as soon as they collided. Immediately, Zhuowen and Wu Zhantian retreated dozens of steps at the same time, standing on opposite sides of the square. This exchange of blows is actually neck and neck. This Hewen is not simple. Moreover, this Hewen seems to have displayed a strong mind power just now. This guy is also an arcanist, and his mind power cultivation is not low. The moment the two separated, the onlookers outside the square were in an uproar. No one expected that this Hewen, who came out of nowhere, could actually fight with the number 1 genius of the sacred martial sect, and not be at a disadvantage. This guy's strength is not bad. Wu Zhirong frowned. Seeing that Wu Zhantian could not crush Hewen, she was secretly unhappy. After all, this Hewen is a sage-to-be who has mastered the power of law. Moreover, he is not an ordinary sage-to-be. It will not be easy for Zhantian to deal with him. But it should be soon. With Zhantian's character, I am afraid that he will not tolerate this kind of thing. He will soon use his full strength and completely crush Hewen. The Great Elder was neither sad nor happy. Just now Wu Zhantian was just showing off his strength. If he had used his full strength, this Hewen would have been crushed to death. Not bad, not bad. Your strength is not bad. You look a few years younger than me, but you can fight with me to this extent. Saying this, Wu Zhantian licked his lips. His eyes were bursting with fighting spirit. He continued, I have not felt this excited for a long time. In order to respect you, I will use my full strength. You will die a worthy death. Saying this, Wu Zhantian suddenly stabbed the purple snake lightning blade into the ground. A strong power of law gushed out from his body. This power of law was very strange. It was dark red in color, and a destructive force faintly spread out from this power of law. The law of destruction. Sure enough, this Wu Zhantian didn't comprehend the power of law. When he was an invincible sovereign lord, he comprehended the law of lightning. This law of destruction should have been comprehended after entering the sage-to-be. The moment this destructive aura burst out from Wu Zhantian's body, the pupils of the people around the square shrank. Their eyes were filled with disbelief. For an ordinary warrior, comprehending a single law was already an extremely difficult thing. Comprehending 2 laws was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Those who could comprehend 2 laws were absolutely monstrous geniuses. There was no doubt that Wu Zhantian was such a terrifying genius. Being able to comprehend 2 laws, once he entered the sage-to-be, his strength would become extremely terrifying. Long Xiaotian was a living example. He, who had just entered the profound sage realm, had comprehended 2 laws of wind and darkness, and his fighting strength was comparable to Elder Raiwa. One must know that the latter was in existence at the peak of the profound sage realm. If Wu Zhantian was able to advance to the sage-to-be, his fighting strength would definitely be extremely abnormal. This was also the reason why Wu Ho attached so much importance to Wu Zhantian. Destruction and lightning are innately complementary to each other. When the 2 are combined, the power that is formed is beyond imagination. Wu Zhantian smiled coldly. The destructive power that was gushing out slowly approached the lightning, and finally fused together. The originally blue lightning began to turn dark red. In the end, it turned into a dark red lightning. This dark red lightning contained an extremely rich aura of destruction, as if this lightning could destroy the entire world. What a terrifying lightning! This Wu Zhantian is really terrifying. He actually combined the laws of destruction and lightning together. The power that is formed is really terrifying. Everyone's heart was trembling. Under the influence of the dark red lightning's destructive aura, their legs couldn't help but tremble. Big Brother has finally revealed the law of destruction. No matter how powerful this He-Wen is, I'm afraid that he will die under Big Brother's move. The corners of Wu Zhirong's mouth curved into a smile. She really wanted to see the fear on He-Wen's face before he died. However, when her gaze fell on He-Wen, she was surprised to find that the latter's eyes were calm and emotionless. Is he putting on an act? Wu Zhirong didn't know why, but when she saw He-Wen's expression, an ominous feeling arose in her heart. The laws of destruction and lightning complement each other, and can actually create such a terrifying power. I wonder, compared to the laws of ice and fire, which one is more powerful? Zhuowen muttered in a low voice. He suddenly opened the ice eye, and the law of ice surged out, and began to combine with the law of fire on the surface of his body. Is that the law of ice? This He-Wen also has the power of a second law. Chapter 1458. Saint Physique revealed the Great Elder's pupils shrank as he stared at Zhuowen. However, he quickly regained his senses and muttered, "This He-Wen isn't simple. However, the laws of ice and fire aren't that powerful. They should be slightly inferior to Zhantian's laws of destruction and lightning." The crowd around the square was dumbfounded. Wu Zhantian possessing a second law was already shocking enough. Now He-Wen had also displayed a second law. This was too shocking. Soon the crowd became excited. They originally thought that this would be a one-sided battle. However, it seemed that it was difficult to determine who would win and who would lose. The laws of ice and fire? Interesting. I want to see just how powerful these two types of laws of yours are. The battle intent in Wu Zhantian's eyes burned even more fiercely. He took a step forward, and his entire body was filled with destructive lightning. 9 layers blade of destruction. Combining the laws of destruction and lightning, Wu Zhantian's speed was so fast that it was dazzling. The crowd couldn't even see his figure clearly. First slash. In an instant, Wu Zhantian had already arrived in front of Zhuowen. The surface of the purple snake lightning blade was filled with dark red lightning. The moment the blade was swung, the entire square began to tremble. The power of the destructive lightning is extremely terrifying. If there is no protective shield, I'm afraid that the people outside the square will be affected. At that time, there may be a lot of casualties. The Great Elder narrowed his eyes and suddenly looked up into the sky. He formed a seal with both hands and suddenly, a sealing power gushed out. Then his right palm landed on the square. Whoosh! A transparent light shield suddenly appeared around the square. It was sparkling, and there were ripples from time to time. Boom! The moment the light shield appeared, Wu Zhantian had already swung his first slash. Then, terrifying dark red lightning bolts burst out from Wu Zhantian and filled the entire square. These dark red lightning bolts bombarded the surface of the light shield, causing the latter to tremble violently. Countless ripples spread across the surface of the light shield. It looked extremely terrifying. Those martial artists who were standing outside the square to watch the battle were suddenly frightened by this terrifying dark red electric thread, their faces incomparably pale. If the Great Elder had not arranged this light shield in advance, the cultivators who were close to the square would have been affected by the dark red electric arcs. The consequences would have been unimaginable. Zhuowen's expression also turned solemn. The power of ice and fire laws condensed on his fist, and then he suddenly punched out. Suddenly, 2 extreme energies soared into the sky, converging into a palace of ice and fire, and smashed towards Wu Zhantian. Rumble! The dark red lightning collided with the ice and fire palace, emitting a terrifying energy. The ground of the square was almost completely shattered, revealing the pitch-black soil underneath. Boom! Boom! Even though Wu Zhantian's attack did not hit its target, his saber did not stop as he continued to hack at Zhuowen. Furthermore, each strike was more terrifying than the previous one. The entire square within the light barrier was filled with dense dark red lightning. It looked extremely strange. Even the light shield on the surface of the square was trembling violently, faintly showing signs of shattering. Many martial artists outside the square retreated far away, not daring to get close to the square, fearing that the light shield would shatter, and they would suffer an unexpected calamity. The eighth strike. An indifferent voice rang out from the countless electric arcs. Immediately, the countless dark red electric arcs began to converge, forming a huge dark red electric saber that was dozens of feet long. As soon as the dark red electric saber was formed, it slashed towards Zhuowen. Immediately, the Ice and Fire Palace, which was in a deadlock with Wu Zhantian, was smashed into smithereens by the saber. The power of the two laws of ice and fire is only SOSO. Wu Zhantian stood above the countless dark red electric arcs, looking down at Zhuowen. He knew that this saber strike would definitely severely injure this lad. 9 flames karmic fire, dark cold poison, come out and combine to form the real Ice and Fire Palace. Zhuowen's indifferent voice slowly rang out from below. Then, the 9 flames karmic fire and dark cold poison gushed out, merging into the Ice and Fire laws, combining to form an even larger Ice and Fire Palace. Boom! The palace and the electric saber came into contact, and the entire space froze. Then a terrifying explosion set off. The light shield around the square collapsed into nothingness under the energy of the explosion. What a terrifying energy! Quickly leave this place. The surrounding martial artists' faces changed, and they quickly retreated away from the square. The first elder waved his right hand, and a surge of saint energy formed a defense in front of him, standing firm. Wu Zhirong stood behind the first elder, her beautiful eyes filled with surprise. She did not expect that Hewen could fight with Wu Zhantian to such an extent. Hewen, I will remember your name. You can actually force me to such an extent. But this is the end. You can't take the 9th strike. Just after the explosion, Wu Zhantian's impassioned voice rang out from the sky. Everyone raised their heads, and they were shocked to find that Wu Zhantian had leaped up 100 miles into the sky, holding the violet snake thunder saber, and dark red lightning twined around his body, like a god descending to the mortal world. The 9th strike. Ever since Zhantian started practicing the 9 blades of destruction, he has never used the 9th strike. The power of the 9th strike is so great that even Zhantian can't control it. It's his ultimate move. This Hewen is doomed. The first elder squinted his eyes, revealing a dignified look. Although the 9th strike was Wu Zhantian's strongest move, the price was not small. Generally, Wu Zhantian would not use it unless he had no other choice. But now he had used it. Obviously, Hewen gave him a lot of pressure, and he had no choice but to use this ultimate move. The 9th strike. This Hewen is interesting, but it's the end. At the top of the central palace, Wu Ho leaned against a stone pillar, his hands crossed in front of his chest as he muttered. Like the first elder, Wu Ho was extremely confident in Wu Zhantian's 9th strike. It was impossible for Hewen to take it. The 9th strike, 9-9 returned to 1. Wu Zhantian's eyes were extremely serious as he slowly waved the violet snake thunder saber. It seemed slow, but it was actually fast, and he actually practiced the first 8 strikes. These 8 strikes were extremely terrifying, and they formed 8 huge dark red lightning sabers around Wu Zhantian's body. The moment Wu Zhantian waved the 9th strike, the 8 sabers issued a clear and melodious sound, and then began to fuse together to form a huge dark red saber, with countless destructive lightning raging on the surface of the huge saber. What a terrifying pressure! How can the aura of the 9th strike be so terrifying? Many warriors in the square were shocked. This strike was too amazing, and the pressure it faintly revealed was far beyond the attack of any half-step sage. I'm afraid that this strike has reached the power of a profound sage, right? Many people's hearts trembled. How heaven-defying was it to be able to display the power of a profound sage before entering the sage realm? There was no doubt that Wu Zhantian's 9th strike was enough to kill any warrior below the sage realm. The person who will kill you is called Wu Zhantian. Remember it well. Wu Zhantian stepped on the giant blade and looked down at Zhuowen from above. His gaze was as though he was looking at an ant. After you remember my name, you can go with peace of mind. After saying that, Wu Zhantian's eyes erupted with terrifying killing intent. He stamped on the huge saber, and the huge saber fell from the sky like a heavy mountain. What was even more terrifying was that this huge saber, which was composed of countless dark red lightning, cut through the void. Wherever it passed, the space collapsed inch by inch like broken glass. It looked extremely terrifying. Zhuowen stood quietly on the platform, looking at the terrifying ninth strike. His eyes were still as calm as an ancient well, as if nothing could make him reveal any other emotions. This strike is really good, but in front of a sage body, it may not be much. Zhuowen murmured in a low voice. His whole body was faintly flickering with golden light, which spread throughout his body like meridians. Originally, Zhuowen could still use the power of other laws to defend against Wu Zhantian's ninth strike. However, the remaining 3 laws were his trump cards. In other words, he was prepared to use them during the 9 Underworld Assembly. If he used them too early, it would be exposed during the 9 Underworld Assembly. However, the sage body was not easy to see. After all, if he wanted to hide it, no one would know that he had a sage body. Moreover, there was no such thing as a sage body in the outside world. This cultivation system was created by the first mountain god of the Azure Dragon Palace. Boom! Without any fancy moves, Zhuowen faced the terrifying huge saber with a simple punch. However, the surface of this punch was covered with dense golden veins, as if it was made of steel. This guy, is he courting death? Zhuowen's action immediately attracted everyone's attention. Originally, everyone thought that Zhuowen would use an extremely powerful trump card to defend against Wu Zhantian's ninth strike. Who would have thought that this guy would only use a single punch? Although some people with keen senses could sense that Zhuowen's punch was unusual, they did not take it to heart. How could such a simple punch be compared to Wu Zhantian's ninth strike? The two were not comparable at all. Looks like you have nothing left to lose. Wu Zhantian sneered. Boom. However, the next scene caused everyone to collectively fall into a daze. Zhuowen's punch landed on the surface of the huge saber. Then the huge saber that was so terrifying that it made everyone suffocate first stopped. Then, countless cracks appeared on the surface of the saber, and it finally shattered into dust. Am I seeing things? Such a terrifying ninth strike was shattered just like that. Moreover, it was shattered by a fist? In the crowd, one of them muttered to himself. Although his voice was very soft, in this silent environment, his voice seemed to be infinitely amplified, exploding in everyone's ears. While everyone was in a state of shock, Wu Zhantian was also in a daze. At this moment, Zhuowen's legs bounced as he leaped up and arrived in front of Wu Zhantian in an instant. Then he threw out a punch. Damn it! Wu Zhantian's pupils shrank as he placed the purple snake lightning saber in front of him. Crack! Chapter 1459. The Fall of a Sage Boom. This punch was powerful and heavy. The power of the sacred body was all gathered in this punch. Wu Zhantian groaned as his body bent over like a cooked prawn. Blood spurted out like a faucet that wasn't turned on properly, following which his body started to crumble like porcelain, with cracks all over its surface. Pucci! Zhuowen took a few steps back and stared indifferently at Wu Zhantian, whose eyes were wide open. Wu Zhantian kept coughing up blood, and the law of destruction and the law of lightning revolved around him, as if resisting some powerful force. Crack! Wu Zhantian's face was hideous, and his eyes were filled with pain. Finally, under countless shocked gazes, Wu Zhantian shattered into pieces. Wu Zhantian is dead. The square became even quieter than before, and this silence was extremely strange. No one spoke, and their actions were strangely consistent, with their mouths wide open, as if they were in a daze. No, big brother. Wu Zhirong's pretty face was as pale as snow, and she took a few steps back. Her beautiful eyes were filled with fear, doubt, and disbelief. You bastard! How dare you kill Zhantian? An oppressive beast-like roar exploded in the air. The great elder's eyes were red, and he rushed over like a madman. Saint force surrounded his body, and he looked like a god or a demon. Zhantian! The moment the great clan elder rushed over, Wu Ho, who had been watching from afar, had his face completely stiffen. From red to green, from green to purple, he finally let out a hoarse and angry roar. That's the patriarch of the sacred martial sect, Wu Ho. Oh my god, this Hewan is in big trouble. He actually killed Wu Zhantian. This is a battle of life and death. Life and death should be left to fate. The sacred martial sect is obviously ignoring the rules. Keep your voice down. This is the territory of the sacred martial sect, and Wu Zhantian is the most powerful genius of the sacred martial sect. Do you really think the sacred martial sect will let him die like this? You're too naive. The moment they saw Wu Ho's figure, many martial artists in the square retreated a few hundred meters. The power of a sage was much more terrifying than a half-sage. Naturally, they did not dare to get close. Of course, many people looked at Hewan with pity in their eyes. Hewan's strength was indeed out of everyone's expectations, but no matter how strong he was not a saint after all. He was probably not a match for the great clan elder in Wu Ho. That Wu Ho is quite far away from here. I'm afraid he'll need around 10 breaths to reach here. If I can make use of this time to get rid of the great elder of the sacred martial sect, then use the law of the void to escape, it should be enough. The moment the great elder in Wu Ho arrived, Zhuowen's mind was spinning rapidly. As for those sacred martial sect disciples that were sent by the great elder to surround them, they were directly ignored by Zhuowen. Even if Zhuowen didn't use the power of the holy body, he could still be regarded as an invincible existence among the half-saints. So he wouldn't put this man in his eyes if he used the holy body. Kill this great elder. Thinking of this, Zhuowen was extremely decisive. He took a step forward and did something that no one expected. Not only did Zhuowen not run, but he also rushed towards the great elder, who was rushing over aggressively. It seemed that he intended to confront the great elder head-on. Does this Hewan think that after killing Wu Zhantian, he has the strength to fight against a profound sage? Although the great elder of the sacred martial sect is only a void profound sage, he isn't someone that he can deal with. The surrounding people revealed strange expressions. Some even thought that Zhuowen was crazy. Even the great elder revealed a stunned expression. But soon, this stunned expression was replaced by a sinister and cold expression. A guy who hadn't entered the profound sage realm dared to face him directly. He simply didn't know how to write the word death. Don't kill him. Wait for me to come over. Wu Ho's loud voice sounded. The great elder nodded slightly and grinned. Sect master, don't worry. This old man won't kill this man. But if this man loses an arm or a leg, I don't think sect master will mind too much, right? As long as you don't kill him, the rest is up to you. Wu Ho said indifferently. The great elder revealed an even more brilliant smile and softly responded. Then, like a great rock spreading its wings, he instantly descended in front of Zhuowen. The law that the great elder grasped was only the law of gold, one of the 5 elemental laws. A golden light spread around his body, then turned into dozens of golden swords in front of him. Each golden sword was surrounded by a lifelike golden dragon, and they had a majestic aura that could swallow the heavens, the earth, the sun, and the moon. Golden swords swallow the sun and the moon. With a sneer, the great elder pinched his sword fingers, and the dozens of golden swords rushed out and rushed towards Zhuowen. However, it was obvious that the great elder didn't intend to kill Zhuowen. The direction of the golden swords wasn't aimed at Zhuowen's vital parts, but at his limbs and other unimportant parts. Looking at the great elder's actions, Zhuowen sneered in his heart. Suddenly, a golden light burst out from his body, and strands of golden veins spread all over his body. At that moment, Zhuowen's body seemed to contain a huge blazing sun, and the vast aura caused the great elder's face to change drastically. Zhuowen no longer held back, and fully unleashed the power of the divine body, like a god or a demon. Rumble! Zhuowen suddenly threw out a punch, and the golden light exploded, smashing onto the surface of the dozens of golden swords around him. Kacha! Unbelievably, the golden swords formed by the great elder's law of gold couldn't withstand a single blow, and they all shattered into countless pieces. How is this possible? The great elder's pupils shrank into needles, and he couldn't help but scream. Swoosh! Zhuowen's momentum didn't decrease, and he stepped into the air and rushed over. Then, he threw out another punch, and his target was the Great Elder's heart. Damn it! This guy clearly doesn't have any saint power aura on him. So how could he shatter my golden swords that were infused with saint power? The Great Elder's face was gloomy, and he felt the golden fist coming at him again. He flipped his hands and suddenly, the golden light burst out, forming a huge pyramid in front of Zhuowen. Zhuowen's eyes were cold, and he suddenly punched the pyramid. Suddenly, a huge force spread out, and the pyramid collapsed. Dragon subduing fist. The moment the pyramid collapsed, Zhuowen's fist changed. With the help of the powerful physical strength of the divine body, he drew a dragon-shaped trajectory in the void. This fist was inherited from Lawrence, and it could subdue a dragon. Its power was vast, and the sun and moon paled in comparison. Rumble! With this punch, tens of thousands of dragons floated, and countless dragon shadows knelt down. A suffocating aura surged out from this punch, and everyone in the square was suppressed to the point that they couldn't breathe. No! The Great Elder's face turned red, and he roared. This punch gave him too much pressure, and it wasn't a punch that a martial artist who hadn't become a saint could unleash. Rumble! The punch landed in front of the Great Elder, and suddenly, countless dragon shadows poured into the Great Elder's body like rivers flowing into the sea. Puffed! The Great Elder spat out a mouthful of blood, and the saint energy in his body was in chaos. His blood boiled and he retreated. Hiss! This scene caused everyone to gasp. The first elder was a saint, and yet he was injured. Moreover, he was injured by a junior who had yet to enter the saint realm. It was unbelievable. Wu Ho, who was rushing over, stopped in his tracks when he saw this scene. Then he sped up, and the murderous intent in his eyes became more intense. To be able to injure a saint, this kid must die, and he must be eliminated. Otherwise there would be endless trouble. Wu Ho has sped up, and I'm afraid he'll reach here in 3 breaths. Zhuowen's eyes were as sharp as a sword, and the power of the divine body was unleashed to the extreme. The dragon's subduing fist punched out, and layer after layer, it landed on the Great Elder's body. Rumble! Under the attack of the punches, the Great Elder's body almost collapsed. Blood stained his clothes, and he looked extremely tragic. There's still 1 breath of time. Zhuowen muttered in his heart, and the last punch landed on the Great Elder's chest. The terrifying power of the punch exploded, and immediately, the sound of glass shattering could be heard. If one could look inside, they would be able to see that the Great Elder's heart, under this attack, had shattered into pieces and turned into dust. At the same time, Zhuowen punched out again, and landed on the Great Elder's dantian. The terrifying power corroded in. But what made Zhuowen frown was that the structure of a saint's dantian was extremely tough, and the punch was unable to completely destroy it. Little bastard, I'll definitely kill you. Wu Ho's eyes were wide open. He had a panoramic view of the Great Elder's miserable state, and the anger in his heart erupted like a volcano. Ah! Zhuowen's face changed, and with a flick of his right hand, he threw the Great Elder in the direction that Wu Ho had come from. Wu Ho grabbed the Great Elder with his right hand, and at the same time, he poured his saint energy into the Great Elder's body to check the latter's condition. His eyes were burning with rage. The Great Elder's heart was shattered, and his dantian was a little messed up by Zhuowen's saint energy. The nascent soul contained within was slightly damaged. Without a doubt, the Great Elder was almost crippled. If he wanted to recover, he would need to pay a huge price, and the Saint Martial sect might not be able to afford it. I'll kill you. Wu Ho was almost crazy. When he first learned that his 3 personal disciples had been killed, he was already vaguely angry, but he did not act out. After all, he knew that the main force of the 9 Underworld Conference was Wu Zhantian. However, his personal disciples were all personally trained by him, and they could play a huge role in the 9 Underworld Conference. But Wu Zhantian's death had really infuriated him, and he even had the thought of killing Zhuowen. The Great Elder was the only saint in the Saint Martial sect other than himself, and he was highly regarded by him. Now that he was seriously injured, Wu Ho almost lost his mind. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and took a step forward, The law of the void lingered around him, and he directly entered the void, disappearing from the square. Boom! Chapter 1460. Identity exposed, he disappeared. Everyone in the square was astonished. Clearly, no one had expected He-Wen to suddenly disappear, and disappear so completely. This is the void law. This guy also knows the void law. Wu Ho's eyes flashed. He remembered that the void law came from Excellent Gods Institute. Yuan Ji had mastered the void law, and was known as the fastest person in the 9 Netherworld realm. There was also Zhuowen, whom he had joined forces with the other saints of the Nether realm to hunt down. He seemed to have also comprehended the void law. After all, the void law was extremely special and difficult to comprehend. There were only a few people who had mastered it. This guy came to our Saint Martial sect to challenge us for no reason. He killed Zhang Tian and injured the Great Elder. This guy? Wu Ho frowned slightly as if he had thought of something. He said angrily, "Bastard, you're Zhuowen, right? You're still alive." Wu Ho could not think of anyone else besides Zhuowen who had mastered the void law, and had taken the initiative to challenge the Saint Martial sect. Zhuowen? Could it be that Zhuowen, who has a celestial saint artifact? Wu Ho's voice was very loud. Everyone in the square, and even the entire Saint Martial city, heard him clearly. Soon after, discussions broke out. The Battle of 9 Netherworld Heaven a few years ago had attracted the attention of countless cultivators in the 9 Netherworld realm. Zhuowen's name had also resounded throughout the 9 Netherworld realm at that moment. Possessing a celestial saint artifact, he had fought against 6 saints. This was an earth-shattering achievement. Although Zhuowen had been beaten back then, he had escaped from the 6 saints in the end. This was something to be proud of. The reason why Zhuowen's name was so resounding was mainly because of his celestial saint artifact. During that period of time, there had even been a frenzy to find Zhuowen. However, as time passed, there were pitifully few clues about Zhuowen. In the end, many cultivators left the matter unsettled. Now that Wu Ho had suddenly shouted out Zhuowen's name, it naturally caused an uproar among the cultivators in the square. Is that He-Wen Zhuowen? It's possible. After all, Wu Ho was one of the 6 great saints who participated in the joint attack on Zhuowen. He should have recognized Zhuowen's identity. This He-Wen has the word Wen in his name. Could it be that Qin Wen, who was rumored to have killed the 3 pro-disciples of the Saint Martial sect, was also Zhuowen in disguise? It's very likely. After all, Qin Wen and He-Wen appeared out of nowhere. I've never heard of them before. It's very likely that they're Zhuowen in disguise. The surrounding people discussed animatedly, while Wu Ho's eyelids twitched. The raging flames in his heart had nowhere to vent, and he almost spat out a mouthful of blood. 3 of his personal disciples and Wu Zhantian were killed. His right-hand man, the Grand Elder, was severely injured and on the verge of death. This time, the Saint Martial sect had suffered a great loss. Don't let me see you again. Otherwise, I'll tear you into pieces and make you die a horrible death. Wu Ho roared furiously. Immediately after, he led the Grand Elder and ordered the sect disciples to clean up Wu Zhantian's corpse, and hurriedly entered the sect. Zhuowen had mastered the law of the void. Even if Wu Ho was stronger than Zhuowen, in terms of escaping, he was still inferior to Zhuowen. Therefore, Wu Ho suppressed the anger in his heart, and prepared to suppress the Grand Elder's injuries first. Above the Saint Martial city, in the pitch-black void, Zhuowen stood quietly, looking down at the Saint Martial sect with an evil smile on his face. What Wu Ho had said just now, he had naturally heard it clearly. Looks like I've been recognized. When the time comes, I can't reveal the law of the void in the 9 Nether Conference. Also, there are many people who recognize the tiger head clear golden spear. When the time comes, I'll enter the Azure Dragon Hall and choose another high-grade Emperor weapon. Zhuowen murmured in a low voice. With a leap, he drilled into the depths of the void and disappeared in an instant. The storm in the Saint Martial sect also spread in the 9 Nether realm in a short period of time. Zhuowen's name once again resounded in the 9 Nether realm. In the Blue Dragon Hall of the Dragon Nether realm, Sapphire Shore suddenly stood up and said with a cold gaze, After more than a year, Zhuowen has finally come out. Moreover, his strength has become so strong. I'm afraid it's all thanks to the Immortal Saint artifact. Otherwise, it's impossible for him to advance so quickly. Elder Raiwa said with a frown. It's very possible. I really don't know what ability Zhuowen has to be able to obtain such an Immortal Saint artifact. A brat who hasn't even entered the Saint realm doesn't have the qualifications to possess such a treasure. Sapphire Shore's eyes shone brightly, and his voice contained a hint of passion. The entire Blue Dragon Hall didn't have an Immortal Saint artifact. Even the more powerful Burning Heaven sect didn't have such an Immortal Saint artifact. Only the mysterious forces in the Central Plains could possibly have such an Immortal Saint artifact. Coupled with the news of Zhuowen causing havoc in the Saint Martial sect, as long as one wasn't a fool, they would naturally attribute Zhuowen's rapid advancement to the Immortal Saint artifact. Sapphire Shore couldn't help but yearn for the Immortal Saint artifact even more. Elder Raiwa's eyes flickered, and he said, however, Zhuowen is very cunning. Moreover, he has mastered the Void Law. It'll be difficult to catch him. Sapphire Shore nodded and said in a deep voice, I'll send people to continue searching for clues about that little bastard Zhuowen. However, we should prepare for the 9 Netherworld Conference. There's only half a year left. It's said that the profound Saint Master sent by the Primal Chaos Temple in the Central Plains has returned. I wonder why he returned to the Central Plains last time. Elder Raiwa suddenly asked. More than a year ago, the profound Saint Master sent by the Primal Chaos Temple had suddenly left the Eastern Plains in a hurry. The 6 saints had joined forces to attack Zhuowen after that profound Saint Master had left. This was also the main reason why the profound Saint Master hadn't appeared when the Immortal Saint artifact had appeared. If the profound Saint Master from the Primal Chaos Temple had interfered, the 6 saints wouldn't have dared to act recklessly. Even if he was only a profound Saint Master, he still had the support of the Primal Chaos Temple. No one would have dared to act recklessly. To be able to travel back and forth from the Central Plains to the Eastern Plains in a little more than a year, as expected of a super force in the Central Plains. Elder Raiwa couldn't help but sigh. The Primal Chaos Temple has powerful existences at the Immortal Saint Master level. Such existences can easily construct long-distance temporary space transmission arrays, which can greatly reduce the time it takes to travel from the Central Plains to the Eastern Plains. I think that profound Saint Master must have relied on that temporary space transmission array to travel back and forth to the Eastern Plains in a little more than a year, Sapphire Shore said in a low voice. The Central Plains was very different from the Eastern Plains, the Southern Barbarian lands, the Northern Plains, and the Western regions. It was located at the core of the continent, and it was extremely far away. Moreover, there were many dangerous environments around the Central Plains. If one wasn't careful, even a saint could fall. What was even more strange was that there was a section of the road to the Central Plains that was a no-fly zone. Even a saint would find it difficult to fly in that area. This also made it very difficult to reach the Central Plains on one's own. Only long-distance space transmission arrays were the most convenient. Of course, heavenly saints like Sapphire Shore and Zhou Tianzong could also fly over if they paid a huge price. However, the 2 of them were already standing at the peak of their respective regions. If they went to the Central Plains, they would probably become mediocre existences. As the saying goes, it's better to be the head of a chicken than the tail of a chicken. The 2 of them paid a huge price to go to the Central Plains, and they didn't want to become mediocre. Moreover, they each had a huge force that they needed to manage. They couldn't possibly abandon their forces and go to the Central Plains. Of course, even if they couldn't go, they could still let the disciples of their sects go. If the disciples of their sects were successful in the Central Plains, it would naturally be a joyous occasion when they returned to their sections. Therefore, the Eastern Plains had a grand event like the 9 Underworlds Assembly. This grand event was to select the true genius disciples, activate the ancient space transmission array, and teleport them all to the Central Plains. As for what would happen to them after that, it would naturally depend on their own luck. I wonder who the profound Saint Master brought back to the Central Plains. Could it have something to do with the 9 underworlds assembly? Elder Raiwa frowned. Perhaps it has something to do with it. Sapphire Shore's eyes flickered as he casually replied. However, he was very clear in his heart that the person that the profound Saint Master brought back was most likely for the Sky Insect avatar. Could it be that the Primal Chaos Temple has discovered some clues? Sapphire Shore secretly thought. Let's not talk about this anymore. Speaking of which, we have to thank Hall Master Qing for this. If it weren't for the help of your Blue Dragon Hall, Ruhul wouldn't have had the chance to find a trace of opportunity and break through to the profound Saint Realm. Elder Raiwa waved his hand. When he mentioned Yen Ruhua, he couldn't help but smile from ear to ear. Yen Ruhua's talent was truly terrifying. Originally, he was only half a step away from the profound Saint Realm. Later, because he was defeated by Zhuowen, he felt deeply humiliated and painstakingly cultivated. Finally, under this pressure, he unexpectedly broke through. Ruhua is still consolidating his cultivation. I think that in a few days, this kid will be able to completely consolidate his cultivation. Currently, he is already in the first mysterious Void Sage realm. Elder Linghua said with a smile. Sapphire Shore waved his hand and said, Then congratulations. Yen Ruhua is worthy of being the holy son of your Burning Heaven sect. His talent is truly extraordinary. The main credit for him being able to break through to the profound Saint Realm so quickly isn't mine, but his own. Elder Raiwa smiled and said, Hall Master Qing is too modest. Your Blue Dragon Hall's Qing Longzi's talent isn't inferior to Yen Ruhua's. I remember that Qing Longzi broke through to the profound Saint Realm earlier than Ruhua. Sapphire Shore smiled slightly and said, I'm not that talented. That kid has indeed broken through to the profound Saint Realm. Hearing this, Elder Raiwa raised his eyebrows and said, It seems that this 9 Serenity Assembly is really going to be very exciting. I'm afraid that some profound Saint Realm geniuses under the age of 300 will emerge. Saint Luck is extremely important to cultivators who have yet to enter the profound Saint Realm. If it weren't for the fact that I'm over 300 years old, I'm afraid that I wouldn't be able to resist participating in this 9 Serenity Assembly, Sapphire Shore said with some envy. Chapter 1461. The benefits of a mysterious person. The news of Zhuowen reappearing in the 9 Netherworld realm, causing havoc in the Saint Martial sect, and killing 3 direct disciples of the Saint Martial sect, the son of Marquis Wu Zhantian, as well as severely injuring the great elder of the Saint Martial sect. Zhuowen is truly an unkillable cockroach. I knew that kid wouldn't die so easily. Lu Hantian stood quietly on top of a mountain peak in the Fine Gods Academy. The wind whistled past, blowing his messy hair, giving him a different style. The current Lu Hantian, whether in terms of temperament or appearance, was vastly different from before. Even the aura on his body was as vast as the sea, extremely deep. Hantian, if this old man's guess is correct, that kid Zhuowen should be coming to the 9 Netherworld Conference. If you want to help him, increasing your strength is the first thing you need to do. Suddenly, an ethereal voice came from behind Lu Hantian. At some point, an old man in a long robe was standing behind Lu Hantian. This old man was the dean of the Fine Gods Academy, Yanji. His gaze fell on Lu Hantian, full of complexity. There was no doubt that Lu Hantian had the Frost Soul Saint physique, and his cultivation speed was extremely fast. In just a little over a year, his cultivation had reached the half-step sage realm. However, Yanji believed that Lu Hantian's potential wasn't limited to this. Before the 9 Netherworld Conference, he hoped that Lu Hantian could advance to the profound sage realm. If you can successfully advance to the profound sage realm before the 9 Netherworld Conference, your strength will be at the top of the younger generation in the 9 Netherworld realm, Yanji continued. Before the 9 Netherworld Conference, I will definitely become a profound sage, Lu Hantian said indifferently, then jumped down from the mountain peak, disappearing from Yanji's sight in a few leaps. Yanji was startled, then shook his head helplessly. That kid is probably still blaming me for Zhuowen's matter. However, Zhuowen's matter has given this little fellow quite a bit of stimulation. Perhaps he really can become a saint before the 9 Underworld Convention. If we add that fellow Yang Yi into the mix, there will be 2 saints among the younger generation of our Divine Academy participating this time. The corners of Yin Ji's mouth revealed a slight smile when he spoke until this point. Soon after, he disappeared from the peak. In the Fine Gods Academy, Lu Hantian was not the only profound sage realm academy. The other profound sage academy was also God. Many disciples of the Gods Academy. Zhuowen was a powerful attack. Zhuowen's Saint Martial Saint sect was able to God. Many disciples were 9 heavens was. Many disciples as 9 netherworld sect were profound sage heavens. Within the academy, Jianan Gatha, Mo Yin Wushang, Qing Yin, and Mo Lingtian, who had a good relationship with Zhuowen, were gathered together. Their faces were filled with excitement and surprise. Back then, the battle between Zhuowen and the profound sage was too terrifying. They were too weak to interfere. Because of this, the 5 of them felt somewhat guilty. Even if it was Zhuowen, if not for the Azure Dragon Hall, he would not be a match for a profound sage. I knew Brother Zhuo would survive, Jianan said with a smile. From the news, Zhuowen even has the strength to heavily injure a profound sage. How terrifying. Mo Lingtian nodded in surprise. Gatha said worriedly. Brother Zhuo has an immortal saint weapon. He has already become the target of everyone in the 9 netherworld realm. Although he has an immortal saint weapon, he can't fight against the entire 9 netherworld realm. I hope Brother Zhuo is safe. Moyin Wushang suddenly stood up. Her beautiful eyes were filled with determination as she said, "We're still too weak. If we were strong enough, we would have been able to help Zhuo. After saying that, Mo Yin Wushang left alone. Sister Wushang Jianan scratched her head. She did not understand. Qing Yin sighed inwardly. She did not say anything. However, she could feel Mo Yin Wushang's inner struggle and sadness. When Zhuowen was besieged by the 6 profound sages, Mo Yin Wushang was the most emotional. If it was not for the Taishan Peak Master, Ci Yuyan, who stopped him, Mo Yin Wushang would have rushed out to help Zhuowen. Zhuowen, that brat, caused quite a commotion. Not far from where Mo Yin Wushang and the others were gathered, there was a lazy figure leaning against the rock wall on a mountain peak. His gaze was not on the gathering place where Mo Yin Wushang and the others were gathered. Instead, it fell on the Hall of Ice and Fire that was suspended in the middle of the 9 peaks. It's a pity that he took the holy symbol of ice and fire last time. However, it may prove that this holy symbol and this brat have some fate. Should I give the remaining energy of the holy symbol of ice and fire to him? Take it as a favor. Having said that, the figure jumped up and swept to the entrance of the Hall of Ice and Fire, as if he had teleported. Strangely, the powerful ice and fire energy of the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace was unable to obstruct or affect him in the slightest. Even more inconceivable was that when this person lightly patted the palace door with his right hand, a crack appeared on the palace door. Whoosh! The person directly entered the hall without making a sound. Come. Standing in the hall, the person stretched out his right hand. A strange rune appeared between his eyebrows. The rune was gray. At first glance, it looked like a gray whirlpool that was constantly sucking in everything around it. Come in. With a low cry, the person's right hand pressed on his eyebrows. Immediately, the gray whirlpool between his eyebrows became bigger and bigger. Finally, it spread and filled the entire first level of the Hall of Ice and Fire. Subsequently, the ice and fire energy in the hall were like rivers flowing into the sea as they poured into the gray whirlpool that had suddenly expanded. The speed is too slow. Increase the efficiency, the person said faintly. Immediately, his right hand moved, and the gray whirlpool rapidly expanded. In an instant, the entire first level was covered by the whirlpool. In 10 breaths' time, the ice and fire energy of the first level was completely absorbed. Of course, the person did not stop because of that. It's too troublesome to absorb one level at a time. Let all the ice and fire energy of the next 17 levels come in. It was clear that this person was getting impatient. With a wave of his hand, the gray vortex immediately shot towards the depths of the ice and fire dual polarity palace like a formless shadow. Wherever it passed, the ice and fire energies were all absorbed. In 10 minutes, the ice and fire energy of the entire Hall of Ice and Fire had been completely absorbed by the gray whirlpool. Swoosh! After absorbing the ice and fire energy, the gray whirlpool began to shrink. Finally, it turned into the size of a thumb and entered the brow of the person. Soon after, it disappeared. The ice and fire energy of the Hall of Ice and Fire has been completely taken away by me. I wonder if that old fellow Yan-ji will go crazy from anger. The person yawned and continued. However, it has nothing to do with me even if he goes crazy from anger. I will definitely do him this favor. After speaking, the person waved his right hand, and a crack appeared in the empty space in front of him. Immediately he entered the crack. If Zhuowen was present, he would definitely be extremely surprised. This was because this person had used the spatial laws to escape into empty space. Why is there no one in the ice and fire energy of the Hall of Ice and Fire? A furious cry was transmitted. Immediately, Yan-ji had appeared above the Hall of Ice and Fire at an unknown time. At this moment, the surface of the Hall of Ice and Fire did not have any ice and fire energy. It was as bare as an ordinary hall. Yan-ji had nearly gone crazy from anger. He continuously stood on the Hall of Ice and Fire to vent his anger. This scene was also witnessed by many people in the inner academy. The ice and fire energy of the Hall of Ice and Fire has disappeared. What's going on? Countless disciples of the inner academy discussed spiritedly. In addition, Yan-ji's loud roar had alarmed the entire inner academy. At the end of the Sea of Bitterness, a figure flew out from the stone tablet of the martial serene domain. It was Zhuowen. Next, I'll head to the divine serene domain. However, before that, I'll first head to the Azure Dragon Hall and choose a suitable weapon. Zhuowen's gaze landed on the stone tablet of the divine serene domain as he softly muttered. Just as he was about to take out the Azure Dragon Hall, he suddenly felt that the surrounding space was a little abnormal. Oh, what's going on? Why does this space seem to be still? Zhuowen felt that something was wrong. His right fist suddenly shot out. However, when it was a few feet away from the space, it seemed to have encountered an invisible barrier. Crack! Crack! After that, the space in an area of 30 m around Zhuowen shattered completely, and it formed a strange cage that confined Zhuowen within it. The power of the laws of the void? Zhuowen's pupils shrank to the size of needles as he cried out in disbelief. In the entire Nine Serene Domain, he seemed to be the only one who had grasped the laws of the void. How did another person jump out now? Who is it? What's the meaning of hiding? After the shock, Zhuowen gradually calmed down and could not help but shout at the space. Little guy, I'm not hiding. I'm just planning to give you some benefits. A strange distorted voice rang out, causing Zhuowen's face to freeze. It was obvious that the owner of the voice had deliberately changed the tone of his voice. His goal was to prevent Zhuowen from discovering his true voice. Who is this person? He grasped the laws of the void and purposely changed his voice. Could it be someone I know? Zhuowen thought to himself. Little guy, take this gift that I'm giving you. After another voice was transmitted from the empty space, it became completely silent. Soon after, Zhuowen discovered that a powerful ice and fire energy suddenly poured down from the sky. Ice and fire energy? Is it the ice and fire energy from the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Hall? Zhuowen was stunned. He was all too familiar with this ice and fire energy. It was the ice and fire energy that was left in the Divine Academy by the Ice and Fire Sacred Talisman. Back then, in order to not be too ruthless, Zhuowen had naturally left a large portion of the ice and fire energy in the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Hall, only bringing out his body. Although he was puzzled, Zhuowen naturally would not reject the ice and fire energy that was sent to him for free. With a thought, he opened his ice-fire eyes at the same time and absorbed all the ice and fire energy from the void into his ice-fire eyes. Chapter 1462. The 9 Great Saint Runes. With the assistance of the Ice-Fire Saint Rune, Zhuowen absorbed the ice and fire energy at an extremely fast speed. In just half an hour, he had completely refined the ice and fire energy from the void. Of course, The reason why it was so fast was because Zhuowen had already refined the Ice Fire Saint rune. Who are you? After absorbing the ice and fire energy, Zhuowen discovered that the power of the void around him had disappeared. To be able to use the laws of the void on him without him noticing and prevent Zhuowen from breaking free, it was obvious that the other party's mastery of the laws of the void was above his. Now, Zhuowen was very curious about the identity of the mysterious person who had suddenly appeared. Not only did this person master the laws of the void, but he also seemed to be very familiar with the Ice Fire Saint rune. There was no doubt that this person's cultivation was far superior to Zhuowen's, but this person did not snatch the Ice Fire Saint rune from him. Instead, this person had helped him bring the ice and fire energy from the ice and fire dual polarity hall to Zhuowen. What was his purpose? Who I am is actually not important. What's important is that you now owe me a big favor. Do you understand? Hearing this, Zhuowen frowned slightly and said coldly, "Since that's the case, then all the more reason you should tell me your identity. After all, I owe you a favor, and I have to repay it. How can I repay it if I don't know who you are?" "Haha, don't worry about that. When I feel that it's time for you to repay it, I will find you." A mocking laugh came from the void and continued, "Moreover, I can see that you're still a novice when it comes to using Saint Talismans. You don't know much about the power of Saint Talismans. Take this thing first and study it carefully." Zhuowen was taken aback. Soon after, a jade strip flew out and landed in his palm. "That's all, I'll be leaving first." The voice in the void gradually weakened and eventually disappeared. "What is this?" Staring at the jade strip lying quietly in his palm, Zhuowen revealed a strange expression. What had happened today was really too strange. Or perhaps it was better to say that he was in the clouds. This is actually the basic usage manual for the Holy Talisman. When Zhuowen's mental energy entered the jade slip, his body trembled, and his eyes were filled with excitement. Ever since he had obtained the Ice Flame Holy Symbol and the incomplete Wind and Thunder Holy Symbol, Zhuowen had been trying to figure out how to use these two holy symbols. Of course, the way he used the sacred talisman was still very shallow and even crude. He knew that he had not grasped the correct way to use it. But now, the jade slip handed to him by the mysterious person who had suddenly emerged from the void actually mentioned the basic method of using the Saint Talisman. To him, this was like a timely rain that was extremely unexpected. "Brat, enter the Azure Dragon Palace first. There will often be people entering and exiting from the 9 secluded realms. If you are discovered, I'm afraid it will be terrible." Xiaohe suddenly reminded Zhuowen. Zhuowen nodded and immediately summoned the Azure Dragon Palace. He directly entered the square, and at the same time, controlled the Azure Dragon Palace to sink to the bottom of the Sea of Bitterness. In the square, Zhuowen held the jade slip in his right hand, while Xiaohe stood on Zhuowen's shoulder, her small eyes filled with a grave expression. "Xiaohe, did you notice the specific appearance of the person in the void just now?" Zhuowen suddenly asked Xiaohe. Unexpectedly, Xiaohe shook her head and said, "That mysterious person in the void is a ruthless person. His cultivation is very terrifying. This dragon lord does not dare to use my mind to scan. Otherwise I will definitely be discovered. Moreover, this person actually has the basic usage manual for the Holy Talisman. I'm afraid he should be the owner of another Holy Talisman." Zhuowen's pupil shrank, and he could not help exclaiming, "The owner of another Holy Talisman? This was the first time he had seen the owner of another Holy Talisman. Of course, this time he had only heard that person's voice, but in any case, they had a certain level of interaction. Previously, when he had obtained a wisp of the Ice Fire Holy Talisman, Xiaohe had said that there were a total of 9 Holy Talismans in the Heavenly Armor Continent. The Ice Fire Holy Talisman was only one of them. Of course, he also had the incomplete half of the Wind and Thunder Holy Talisman. As for the remaining 7 Holy Talismans, Zhuowen did not know much about them. "Xiaohe, this time you should tell me about the Holy Talismans, right?" Zhuowen suddenly asked in a serious tone. Xiaohe waved her hand and pointed at the jade slip. "Don't ask me. This jade slip should have mentioned it. Take a closer look." "Oh, Zhuowen began to carefully read the contents of the jade slip with a skeptical heart. Then his expression turned serious. As Xiaohe had said, the jade slip did indeed have information about the 9 holy talismans. The 9 holy talismans were the Ice-Fire Holy Talisman, Wind and Thunder Holy Talisman, Heavy Shield Holy Talisman, Spinning Thorn Holy Talisman, Eternal Holy Talisman, Prediction Holy Talisman, Blood Sacrifice Holy Talisman, King Blade Holy Talisman, and Beast Envoy Holy Talisman. Zhuowen had the Ice-Fire Holy Talisman and Wind and Thunder Holy Talisman, so there was no need to introduce their functions. The remaining 7 holy talismans had different abilities and extraordinary powers. The Heavy Shield Holy Talisman was the strongest defensive holy talisman. It could extract the hardest rock from the earth's core and float it on the surface of the body, forming an impenetrable strong defense. The Spinning Thorn Holy Talisman could create endless gray vortexes. These gray vortexes could be used for both defense and attack. It was a holy talisman that emphasized balance. The Eternal Holy Talisman did not have any destructive power. Warriors who had such a holy talisman could attach a part of their soul to the holy talisman. As long as this part of the soul was not destroyed, the physical body could be revived without any restrictions. The Eternal Holy Talisman was similar to Jianan's Undying Armor Soul. However, the Eternal Holy Talisman was more perverted than the Undying Armor Soul. The Divination Holy Talisman, as the name suggested, could predict good or bad fortune, past life, present life, and future. However, the price was one's lifespan. In other words, each divination would consume one's lifespan. The price was very high. The Blood Sacrifice Holy Talisman was a powerful holy talisman that could use the blood of living beings. It had the ability to sacrifice one's blood to gain battle strength. The purer the blood, the more perverted the increase in battle strength. Killing an enemy would allow one to obtain a layer of the enemy's blood essence and cultivation. It was an extremely terrifying holy talisman. The King Blade Holy Talisman was the king of weapons and could control all weapons. However, only those who were obsessed with weapons could activate the King Blade Holy Talisman. The conditions were extremely harsh. The Beast Envoy Holy Talisman could control all meta-beasts that were stronger than the user. At the same time, it had the effect of a force contract. A force contract could restrict meta-beasts that were stronger than the user. If the user was strong enough, they could even tame sacred beasts. After reading the introduction of the various holy talismans, Zhuowen let out a sigh of relief. His eyes lit up. Only now did he realize that the 9 great holy talismans were not simple. Each of them had powerful functions. I wonder which of the 9 great saint talismans the mysterious person in the void has on his body. Why was he so enthusiastic about helping me perfect the Ice-Fire Holy Talisman? Thinking of this, Zhuowen was even more puzzled. That mysterious man also said that when he needs you to return the favor, he will appear again. At that time, you will be able to meet again, and that guy's identity will be as clear as day, Blackie said faintly. That's true. Let me change my weapon first. Then, I will read the entire manual. Zhuowen nodded and did not think too much about it. Since someone was trying to sell him a favor, there was no reason for him not to buy it. Zhuowen re-entered the treasure repository and replaced the tiger head clear gold spear with a high-tier emperor artifact halberd. This was also to deceive others. After all, he had caused a ruckus in the Saint Martial sect. Many people had seen the tiger head clear golden spear. After leaving this time, he naturally could not bring the tiger head clear golden spear out again. After changing his weapon, Zhuowen settled down to study the basic usage manual of the holy talisman. As time passed, Zhuowen continued to study the manual. As he continued to study the manual, he discovered many unknown characteristics of the holy talisman. Of course, he was much more proficient in using the holy talisman than before. He spent a total of 3 months studying the manual. Although he had not reached perfection in the usage of the holy talisman, he was much more proficient in it than before. How to use the holy talisman to maximize the power of the holy talisman was the core of the manual. Due to the replenishment of the remaining ice and fire energy, The power of the ice and fire holy talisman in Zhuowen's body was much stronger than before. If the ice and fire energies were combined, the power that could erupt would definitely be extremely terrifying. There are still 3 months until the 9 Underworld Conference. I wonder if Father will participate? Zhuowen's eyes flickered. He used the communication jade charm to contact Long Xiaotian in the panicked Great World. After a while, the latter appeared on the square. Zhuowen, why are you looking for me? Long Xiaotian asked curiously. Father, do you plan to participate in the 9 Underworld Conference this time? Zhuowen suddenly asked. Long Xiaotian was startled. He immediately shook his head and said, I won't participate. Now that I have reached the peak of the profound sage realm, the saint luck of the 9 Underworld Conference won't be of much use to me. I won't compete with you. However, you can take Long Xiaotian with you. This little guy has already become a profound sage. He is now in the void profound sage realm. The saint luck should be of great use to him. Oh, Long Xiaotian? Then I will summon him and ask him what he wants. Zhuowen nodded and summoned Long Xiaotian to the square. Lord Zhuowen, may I know why you are looking for me? Long Xiaotian knelt on one knee in front of Zhuowen and asked respectfully. Zhuowen helped Long Xiaotian up and said with a smile, We are all descendants of the Ryuka, so there is no need to be so reserved. This time, I summoned you to ask you if you plan to participate in the 9 Underworld Conference with me. Yes, Long Xiaotian immediately agreed. He had heard about the 9 Underworld Conference from Long Xiaotian. It was said that Saint Luck would appear here, which could promote profound sage realm experts to become profound sages. This thing was extremely precious. Well, then come with me to the 9 Underworld realm. Chapter 1463. 9 Nether Meeting. Ascending stairway before entering the Divine Spectre realm, Zhuowen had changed his appearance again, and changed his name to Wenjua. As for Long Tian, because his surname was Long, Zhuowen naturally changed his name to Tian Long. At this moment, the Divine Spectre realm had many things to do. The Battle of the Saints back then had brought about quite a disaster to this small world. It had almost reached the point where there were whales everywhere. However, in the past year or so, the Divine Spectre Academy had implemented many remedial measures, causing the originally dilapidated Divine Spectre realm to have a brand new look. Zhuowen and Long Tian did not enter the Divine Spectre Academy. This time, they planned to participate in the 9 Nether meeting as rogue cultivators. Of course, they would go through the Divine Spectre realm. It is said that the 9 Nether Sky platform has been successfully completed. A month before the 9 Nether meeting, various stairways will be released in the 9 Nether realms, allowing the 9 Nether realm cultivators who want to participate to ascend the 9 Nether Sky platform. Not long after entering the Divine Spectre realm, Zhuowen heard the discussions of the cultivators passing by. Most of the topics revolved around the 9 Nether Sky platform. Zhuowen, what is the 9 Nether Sky platform? Long Tian asked curiously. The 9 Nether Sky platform is the location of the 9 Nether meeting this time. Zhuowen began to explain to Long Tian. Even though Zhuowen had already left the 9 Netherworld realm for a long time, his 2 clones were still in the 9 Netherworld realm, so he was naturally clearly aware of the great commotion that had occurred in the 9 Netherworld realm over the past year. The 9 Nether Sky platform was jointly built by the saints of the 9 Nether realms more than a year ago. The place where the 9 Nether Sky platform was built was the 9 Nether Heaven above the 9 Nether realms. In order to build the 9 Nether Sky platform, the planet-shaped 9 Nether realms were originally arranged in a straight line. Under the joint efforts of the saints, they were arranged in a circular shape. It was said that the saint luck this time also came from the depths of the 9 Nether Heaven. What was even more unbelievable was that someone from the Primal Chaos Temple had come this time. It was said that the person who came was a heavenly saint. This cultivator was brought by the profound Saint Master, who stayed in the 9 Nether realm. Could it be that the people from the Primal Chaos Temple have already found the heavenly insect clone? Should I inform the Primal Chaos Temple of the whereabouts of the heavenly insect? Zhuowen's eyes flashed. He was well aware of the terror of the heavenly insect. Even if it was just a clone, if left alone, it would be a great disaster. Now that I'm in the 9th netherworld realm, I'd better not act rashly. Since it's someone from the primal chaos temple, I'm afraid that Heavenly Worm won't dare to act rashly. It won't be too late to inform him after the 9th netherworld conference. Currently, Zhuowen was wanted by the entire 9 netherworld realm. Moreover, if the people from the primal chaos temple found out that he had an immortal sacred artifact on him, the first person they would capture would probably be him. Therefore, Zhuowen did not dare to casually joke around with his life. Let's wait for 2 months first. After 2 months, the 9th Underworld Sky platform will release the 9th Underworld Sky stairway. At that time, we can go up together, Zhuowen said to Long Tian. The latter naturally had no objections, so the two of them found a place to stay nearby and began to wait in peace. Perhaps it was because of the 9th Netherworld Conference, Zhuowen discovered that the number of people in the Divine Nether Realm was much higher than usual. He could even see many powerful martial warriors on the streets. After all, the Divine Nether Realm was a small world with a huge territory. Naturally, there were many experts who kept a low profile. Now that the 9th Netherworld Conference was imminent, they naturally no longer kept a low profile. Instead, they took the initiative to participate in this 9th Netherworld Conference. 2 months slowly passed by. Finally, a black crack appeared in the sky of the Divine Nether Realm, and within that crack, a pure white jade staircase descended from the sky. This white jade staircase was very long, from the horizon all the way to the top of the mountain range at the end of the Divine Nether Realm. The staircase to the 9th Netherworld Sky platform has finally been released. That's the most famous mountain in the Divine Nether Realm, the Heaven Upholding Peak. It's near the Divine Academy. Let's go there quickly. The appearance of the white jade staircase immediately caused an uproar. Figures appeared everywhere in the Divine Nether Realm. They were densely packed like locusts. So many people. In an inn, Zhuowen and Long Tian walked out. Looking at the countless figures in the sky, Long Tian was secretly speechless. Come, let's go. The two of them were also unwilling to fall behind. They followed the crowd and silently approached the Heaven Upholding Peak. At the bottom of the 9 peaks of the Divine Academy, a large group of disciples had already gathered. The 9 peak masters of the 9 peaks stood at the front of this group of disciples, as if they were waiting for something. So. 3 powerful figures flew over and floated in the air above the crowd. These 3 people were naturally Yanji, Jiangxian and Wenbai. Among them, Yanji's face was still gloomy. Ever since the ice and fire energy of the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Palace had been sucked away, the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Palace had completely lost its tempering effect. Now it had become a vase that could only be admired. Yanji secretly swore in his heart that if he met the fellow who took away the ice and fire energy, he would definitely not let him off easily. Let's go to the Heaven Upholding Peak. Yanji spoke and led the crowd into the air, flying towards the Heaven Upholding Peak not far away. In a short while, they arrived at the peak of the Heaven Upholding Peak. The Heaven Upholding Peak was quite large. In the center of the peak, the bottom of the white jade staircase was firmly connected to the peak without any gaps. At this moment, there were still few people on the peak. After all, the Heaven Upholding Peak was the closest to the Divine Academy. They only needed to fly a short distance to reach it. There's a restriction? Looks like it's not time to climb the sky staircase yet. Yanji came to the front of the staircase and discovered an invisible barrier in front of him. He frowned and muttered, "Then let's wait." Jiangxian and Wenbai stood behind Yanji, waiting silently. So. As time passed, the sound of something breaking through the air could be heard. The other warriors of the Divine Nether Realm had all rushed over and landed on the peak. However, the position at the peak was very limited, and the number of warriors who came was extremely large, so the fight for the position at the peak began. Many of the weaker warriors were chased away by the stronger warriors who came later. There were even some vicious and merciless experts who directly took the lives of others, intimidating many people. The disciples of the Divine Academy stood quietly on one side, watching the fight on the other side. Their faces showed that they were used to seeing such a scene. They were the forces of the Divine Academy. Naturally, no one would be so blind as to challenge the authority of the Divine Academy. Come, let's enter the peak as well. Zhuowen and Long Tian also arrived at the heaven-upholding peak. Although the fight on the peak was extremely intense, the two of them turned a blind eye to it. Hey, are the two of you looking to die? You actually dare to let him come up? An attack suddenly swept over, pouncing towards Zhuowen and Long Tian. Zhuowen's gaze turned cold. With a wave of his sleeve, the attack collapsed. The one who's looking to die is you, not me. After breaking the attack, Zhuowen's gaze landed on a man around 30 years old. His cultivation was roughly at the high-level martial emperor realm. He could be considered above average among this group of people. Seeing how easily Zhuowen broke his attack, the man knew that he had encountered a tough opponent. He hurriedly smiled and said, "That was a misunderstanding. Brother, feel free to come up." Misunderstanding? Sorry. I also misunderstood that you wanted to kill me, so I planned to return the favor. Zhuowen waved his sleeve, and a powerful force swept out, slamming into the man's body. Although the latter tried his best to resist, it was to no avail. He shattered into a cloud of blood mist. Zhuowen's ruthless action caused many of the surrounding people to gasp. Then, no one dared to attack Zhuowen and Long Tian. Zhuowen's lips curled into a smile. He brought Long Tian to a secluded corner not far from Xie Shin Academy. The reason why he killed so decisively was naturally to make an example out of them as soon as possible. More and more cultivators gathered at the mountain peak. In the end, the mountain peak became crowded, and the battles became more and more intense. However, with the arrival of the major forces of the Divine Spectre realm, the number of independent cultivators decreased. Instead, they were replaced by cultivators from other forces of the Divine Spectre realm. Among them, the Great Lane Temple had also come. What was strange was that the disciples of the Great Lane Temple were basically young monks with shaved heads. The leader was covered in Buddhist light, and he followed behind Master Xian Xian. That young monk is Buddhist, who has recently become famous. It is said that Buddhist cultivation has reached the half-step saint realm. He has inherited most of Master Xian Xian's legacy. He has also comprehended the extremely powerful law of karma. He is a terrifying opponent. When the Great Lane Temple descended on the mountain peak, it immediately attracted the attention of many people. Especially Buddhist, who was following behind Master Xian Xian, became the focus of everyone's attention. After Buddhist landed on the mountain peak, he casually looked around. His gaze finally landed on Zhuowen, who was in a secluded corner. The corner of his mouth curled into a faint smile. Not many people knew that Buddhist was Zhuowen's doppelganger. Other than Zhuowen's close friends, only Yanji, Jiang Xian, Wenbai, and Xiaoyu knew about it. Even the Blue Dragon Hall's hall master, Sapphire Shore, did not know that Zhuowen actually had two doppelgangers. If Sapphire Shore knew about it, he would definitely take the initiative to destroy Buddhist and demonic. Benefactors Yanji, Jiang Xian, and Wenbai, how have you been? After Master Xian Xian landed on the mountain peak, he slowly walked towards Yanji, and the other two with a smile on his face. Master Xian Xian, Yanji and the other two did not dare to be negligent. They all returned the greeting, and the four of them started to discuss in detail. Although Master Xian Xian's cultivation was not as high as Yanji's, he was much stronger than Jiang Xian and Wenbai. Therefore, Yanji and the other two had no choice but to treat him with caution. After all the major forces gathered at the mountain peak, the battle from before completely stopped. Many cultivators who were unable to occupy a spot could only hover outside the mountain peak, depressed, as they waited for the stairway to heaven to open. 9 Nether Gathering Stairway to Heaven. Suddenly, a vast voice resounded from the 9 Nether sky. Shortly after, the restriction in front of the white jade stairway disappeared in an instant. Let's go. Let's climb the stairway to heaven. On the mountain peak, the eyes of all the disciples of the major forces lit up. Shortly after, they flew towards the stairway to heaven like locusts. Chapter 1464. The Nine Serenities Sky Platform. What a strange power! As soon as he stepped onto the stairs, Zhuowen sensed a strange power coming from the top of the stairs. This power merged with his meridians like countless small bombs, exploding loudly, trying to turn his meridians into dust. However, Zhuowen's cultivation was strong. He circulated his immortal energy, and immediately resisted the power that was trying to enter his meridians. Ah! Suddenly miserable cries came from the stairs below. Soon after, Zhuowen noticed in astonishment that many of the martial practitioners who had just entered the stairs had directly exploded and died. Those below the high-level Great Emperor realm will die without a doubt if they climb the stairs to heaven. Another loud voice rolled down from the sky, causing Zhuowen's eyes to narrow slightly. It seemed that there was a limit to the stairs to heaven. Cultivators below the high-level Great Emperor realm couldn't withstand it at all. Let's continue climbing the stairs to heaven. No longer paying attention to the situation below, Zhuowen and Long Tian made their way to the top in an orderly manner. They weren't too fast or too slow. Without a doubt, the disciples of the Fine Theology Academy and the Great Thunderclap Temple were far ahead of the rest of the cultivators. The stairs to heaven were close to 10,000 feet tall. High-level Great Emperors could barely reach the top. Is this Nine Serenities heaven? It's so dark, as if nothing exists. The disciples of the Fine Theology Academy and the Great Thunderclap Temple were the first to reach the top of the stairs, followed by the other cultivators. When the crowd saw the scenery of Nine Serenities heaven, they were all shocked. Nine Serenities heaven was outside the Nine Serenities realm. It was an empty space. Most cultivators had never seen it before. Now that they were seeing it for the first time, they were naturally surprised and curious. Zhuowen was among the crowd. He wasn't surprised. After all, he'd seen Nine Serenities heaven before. However, what surprised Zhuowen was that the 9 planets floating in Nine Serenities heaven weren't arranged in a straight line like before. Instead, they were arranged in a ring. In the void at the center of the 9 planets stood an extremely vast white jade platform. The platform was tens of thousands of kilometers wide and was divided into several regions. Forests, swamps, mountains, rivers, and other natural landscapes were slowly displayed on the platform, just like a small world. The platform stood in the void, and 9 long white jade bridges extended from 9 directions of the platform, heading towards the direction of the 9 great netherworlds. The end of one of the long white jade bridges was the divine netherworlds. Look, it's a genius from another nether realm. On the square platform of the divine nether realm, many warriors were discussing animatedly as they looked towards the square platforms of the other nether realms. Zhuowen was no exception. However, when his gaze swept across the 6 platforms, the Dragon Netherworld Realm, Martial Netherworld Realm, Killing Netherworld Realm, Death Netherworld Realm, Flower Netherworld Realm, and Night Netherworld Realm, an extremely blazing coldness erupted from his eyes. The Saint Sovereigns of the 6 great netherworlds had once joined forces to snatch the Saint artifact from Zhuowen. Moreover, they had also caused him to miss the opportunity to snatch back Mu Qinxue. Zhuowen hated the 6 great netherworlds to the core. Very quickly, after Zhuowen's gaze swept past the 6 great netherworlds, it landed on the square platform of the Demon Netherworld Realm. On that square platform, there were powerful demon emperors gathered. The person leading them was a charming young woman. She wore a rather revealing armor and had a pair of cute furry cat ears on her head. A pair of dark golden pupils, however, carried a cold and detached look, keeping people 1,000 miles away from him. Many demon emperors in the demon netherworld realm looked at the young woman with reverence in their eyes. Behind this young woman stood 3 graceful figures. All 3 of them had peerless beauty, causing one's heart to tremble when they saw them. One of them was a girl with a pair of wings on her back. She was pure and lovely. As soon as she stepped onto the platform, her beautiful eyes scanned the square platform, as if she was looking for something. However, after searching for a long time, the winged girl's beautiful eyes revealed a trace of disappointment. Is that Wu Dai? Looking at the winged girl who was looking around, Zhuowen couldn't help but smile. Wu Dai's cultivation speed was rather fast. Her cultivation had also reached the half-step saint level. Coupled with her identity as a dark soul ice butterfly, her battle strength was definitely not simple. After retracting his gaze from the demon netherworld realm, Zhuowen landed in the direction of the desolate netherworld realm. On the square platform of the desolate netherworld realm, demonic aura soared into the sky. All the people gathered there were terrifying demonic cultivators. The billowing demonic aura danced like a group of demons, looking exceptionally ferocious. The leader of the desolate netherworld realm's deserted island was called Huang Imo. Demonic aura surged from his body as countless demonic shadows lingered around him. A terrifying demonic aura gushed out from Huang Mo's body. On the square platform, many demonic cultivators were dozens of steps away from Huang Imo. The atmosphere around Huang Imo was extremely cold and lonely. Of course, there were only 3 people who were like boulders following behind Huang Imo. One of them wore a ghost mask and carried a long black saber on his back. His eyes were slightly closed, and the demonic aura around him was extremely terrifying. Zhuowen only glanced at the man with the ghost mask before his gaze fell on the other 2. Zhuowen was naturally very familiar with these 2 people. They were his demonic doppelganger, Mo1, and the Lord of Tai Mo. When Zhuowen had first joined the Divine Academy, his demonic doppelganger had followed the Lord of Tai Mo to the desolate netherworld realm to cultivate. Both of them were demonic cultivation geniuses. Not long after entering the desolate netherworld realm, they were noticed by the people of the deserted island and were carefully nurtured. Of course, Mo1's progress was the fastest. His reputation and cultivation were catching up to the number 1 genius of the deserted island, Guisha. Guisha was the guy with the ghost mask. I wonder who's hosting the 9 Underworld Conference this time. Zhuowen's gaze fell on the dragon netherworld realm. He found that Sapphire Shore was still standing there calmly, without any intention of moving. He couldn't help but be a little surprised. It was said that Sapphire Shore had personally hosted the 9 Underworld Conference in the past, but this time seemed to be a little different. Whoosh! Whoosh! Suddenly, 2 figures flew out from the center of the 9 Underworld sky platform. These 2 figures weren't young, around 40 years old. One of them wore an arcane robe and was filled with powerful immortal chi. Without a doubt, he was an arcane saint master. The other person wore a green robe and had a goatee. His muscles were bulging, and his hands were behind his back. He looked around as if he was inspecting something. Greetings, everyone of the Eastern lands. I am Chao Rong, and I have received the order of the Chaos Temple to host the 9 Underworld Conference. I believe everyone will welcome me? Chao Rong said with a smile, which immediately attracted the attention of countless cultivators. He's actually sent by the Chaos Temple. I remember that the Chaos Temple is an extremely powerful force in the Middle Lands. However, such a force will soon interfere with the affairs of the other continents. Why are they interfering this time? Zhuowen frowned slightly. The aura from Chao Rong's body was very powerful. Even Sapphire Shore in the Dragon Netherworld realm would have to think twice before facing Chao Rong. Zhuowen guessed that Chao Rong was very likely a Heavenly Saint cultivator. As for what Heavenly Saint realm he was in, he wasn't very clear. He only knew that Chao Rong's aura might not be comparable to Zhou Tianzong's, but it wasn't far off. Chao Rong didn't wait for the crowd's reply and continued. I'm taking over the hosting of the 9 Underworld Conference this time with the approval of Hall Master Qing. Moreover, everyone knows that this 9 Underworld Conference is related to the quota to enter the Middle Lands. Of course, I will still mention a piece of good news. If any of you have good seedlings, I will accept you on behalf of the Chaos Temple and bring you back to the Chaos Temple. Whoosh! Chao Rong's words caused a huge uproar. The Chaos Temple's influence in the Middle Lands was very strong and deeply rooted. It was extremely difficult to join such a force. Even for the cultivators in the Middle Lands, it was extremely difficult to join the Chaos Temple. Unless you were a peerless monster, it would be very difficult to enter. But now, Chao Rong said that he might choose good seedlings in the 9 Underworld Conference and directly accept them into the Chaos Temple. This was definitely great news. Looking at the huge reaction around him, Chao Rong's lips curled into a smile as he continued. Therefore, if you work hard, there's a chance of you being chosen by me. This sentence immediately caused the entire place to explode, and the clamor never stopped. Chao Rong's tone isn't small. Zhuowen, who was in the crowd, was as calm as ever. He didn't feel any joy at all. All right, I won't waste any more time. Any cultivator below the age of 300 and above, who is a high-level martial emperor, can come to the 9th underworld heavenly platform on their own. As for the leaders of the various secluded realms, I'm afraid they can only watch from the square platform. For the sake of their own safety, the leaders of the various secluded realms should not attempt to enter the 9th underworld sky platform. Chao Rong continued. The leaders of the 9 secluded realms looked at each other and sighed softly. They stood where they were without moving and ordered their disciples to head to the 9 nether sky platform. Whoosh! Whoosh! Sounds of breaking air rang out one after another. Immediately after, under the permission of the faction leader, the cultivators stepped onto the long white jade bridge in an orderly manner. Very quickly, a long stream of people appeared on the long white jade bridge. Yang Yi, you little brat, go up first. Give everyone a good start. In Siyashan Institute, old man Tian Du was glaring at the lazy figure not far away. Yang Yi shrugged and said, Since you're sincerely begging me, then I'll reluctantly take the lead. As he spoke, Yang Yi stepped onto the long white jade bridge and walked towards the 9th underworld sky platform. Old man Tian Du was so angry that his teeth were itching. What was Yang Yi saying? What he said just now wasn't a plea, it was an order. Following closely behind Yang Yi was Fu Yu of the Divine Devil Peak, and the genius disciples of the other main peaks. After all the disciples of Siyashan Institute had stepped onto the long white jade bridge, it was the Great Lightning Tune Temple's turn next. The rogue cultivators quietly waited at the back. They had no power or influence, and could only be the last. This was the sorrow of rogue cultivators. Chapter 1465. Birth Saint Luck. There were hundreds of thousands of 9 Nether Realm cultivators participating in the 9 Nether Conference. Apart from the elimination of nearly half of the 9 Nether Realm cultivators, most of the cultivators who were over 300 years old were eliminated during the White Jade Bridge segment. Only a few tens of thousands of people actually came to the 9 Netherworld platform. However, compared to the platform's enormous size, tens of thousands of people only occupied a small portion of it. Chao Rong quietly floated above the crowd and said expressionlessly, The 9 Netherworld realms have their number 1 genius. Come out and let me see. Also, tell me your name. As soon as he finished speaking, the crowd looked at each other, and 8 figures slowly walked out from the crowd. Dragon Netherworld Realms Qing Longzi. Divine Netherworld Realms Yang Yi. Flower Netherworld Realms Flower Fairy. Death Netherworld Realms Shuasia. Killing Netherworld Realms Shazi. Night Netherworld Realms Yiksha. Desolate Netherworld Realms Gui Sha. Demon Netherworld Realms Yun Ran. Chao Rong nodded as he sized up these 8 figures, and he revealed a wisp of admiration as he said, Not bad indeed. 5 of you have actually reached the Profound Saint Realm. 4 of you are at the Void Saint Realm, and 1 is at the Nirvana Saint Realm. As soon as these words came out, the crowd went into an uproar. Because the 8 people who came out had concealed their auras, the crowd couldn't see their cultivation. Now that Chao Rong pointed it out, the crowd couldn't help but be shocked. 5 of the 8 people had become saints. As expected of the top geniuses of the various Netherworld realms, Yen Ruhua, who was in the Blue Dragon Hall's team, pursed his lips. In fact, he also wanted to show off, but Chao Rong only asked the top geniuses of the 9 Netherworld realms to come out. He wasn't a genius of the 9 Netherworld realm, so he naturally wasn't qualified to come out. You're Qing Longzi of the Blue Dragon Hall, right? You're not bad. I'm looking forward to your performance. Chao Rong deeply glanced at the indifferent Qing Longzi, and her words that were filled with deep meaning immediately attracted the attention of the surrounding people. Looks like Qing Longzi's cultivation is the highest among the crowd. Otherwise, Lord Chao Rong wouldn't specifically mention him. With Chao Rong's reminder, many people looked at Qing Longzi with reverence. The profound sage realm was divided into 5 small realms, which were called the 5 profound sage realms. They were the profound void realm, the nirvana realm, the profound prying realm, the profound purifying realm, and the profound shattering realm. Qinglongzi was obviously the one with the highest cultivation among the 5 that Qiao Rong had mentioned, having reached the second profound nirvana realm. To be able to reach the nirvana saint realm at this age, Qinglongzi's talent was absolutely incomparably high. Of course, this was also inseparable from the Blue Dragon Hall's vigorous cultivation. Congratulations, Hall Master Qing. I didn't expect Qinglongzi to be able to advance to the Nirvana Saint realm. I'm afraid the champion of this 9 Nether Conference is already set in stone. In the past, the champions were basically all from the Blue Dragon Hall. This time should be no exception. As soon as Qiao Rong finished speaking, the leaders of the other forces on the 9 platforms all cupped their hands and congratulated Sapphire Shore. It was obvious that they were trying to curry favor with him. Sapphire Shore slightly raised his chin. Although he repeatedly waved his hand and modestly said no, his eyes were full of pride. Sapphire Shore, this old fart, looks like he's invested a lot in Qinglongzi. He actually allowed him to advance to the Nirvana Saint realm. On the platform of the Divine Nether realm, Yanji frowned slightly. His eyes were full of displeasure. Don't the Eastern lands have the 9 Nether realms? Now that only 8 people have come out, where's the last one? Qiao Rong suddenly said. As soon as these words came out, many of the surrounding cultivators had a strange look on their faces. Without a doubt, this Nether realm that hadn't appeared yet was the Martial Nether realm. What happened in the Martial Nether realm was spread throughout the 9 Nether realms. They all knew that the 3 direct disciples of the Saint Martial sect, and the strongest disciple, Wu Zhantian, were killed in the Martial Nether realm. Even the Grand Elder of the Saint Martial sect, a Void Arcane Saint Realm Saint, was severely injured. It was extremely miserable. And all of this was said to have been done by Zhuowen. Back then, Zhuowen had fled pathetically under the joint attack of the 6 great saints. Now that he had returned, it was for revenge. The Saint Martial sect had undoubtedly become the first target of Zhuowen's revenge. I'm the current #1 genius of the Martial Nether realm. Suddenly, a somewhat timid voice came. Immediately, a young man in his 20s walked out from the Martial Nether realm's team. Perhaps feeling everyone's strange gaze, the young man hurriedly walked to the front. His eyes were on his nose and his nose was on his heart. He didn't dare to look at Qiao Rong. This is the 9th level Emperor realm? Qiao Rong's gaze froze. He looked at the timid young man with some surprise, but his heart was extremely strange. The #1 geniuses of the other 8 Nether realms weren't powerful saints. They were at least half saints. However, the #1 genius of the Martial Nether realm was only at the 9th level Emperor realm. Could it be that the Martial Nether realm was so weak? On the platform of the Martial Nether realm, Wu Ho's face was extremely ugly. Qiao Rong's surprised words were like a ruthless slap to his face. However, he was also extremely helpless. After all, the 4 strongest geniuses of the sect had been killed by Zhuowen. Even Wu Zhantian was dead. He couldn't bring out any more powerful disciples. Zhuowen, that little bastard, don't let me see you again. If I see you, I'll make sure you die a horrible death. Wu Ho clenched his fists and said fiercely, Palace Master Qing, do you think that Zhuowen will participate in the 9 Nether Conference? On the platform of the Dragon Nether realm, Elder Raiwa asked in a low voice. Sapphire Shore shook his head and said, that little bastard won't dare to come. Although his strength has indeed increased rapidly, what can a guy who hasn't become a saint do? That's right. Looks like we can only wait for the 9 Nether Conference to deal with that little bastard. Elder Raiwa nodded. Sapphire Shore smiled slightly. He had to eliminate Zhuowen. However, he wasn't in a hurry, because the 9 Nether Conference was very important to him. If the method that Skyworm mentioned works, perhaps I can really control the 9 Nether realm. Qiao Rong and the profound Saint Master beside him walked to the eastern area of the platform. There were 3 huge circular platforms in this area. The platforms were connected to each other by iron chains. At the edge of the first platform, There were 9 stone pillars. There were many runes on the surface of the pillars that flickered with powerful energy. These energy lights gathered together to form a dark blue barrier. There were ripples on the surface of the barrier. On the second platform sat a rather majestic hall. This hall faintly revealed a trace of Saint Aura. It didn't look simple at all. The third platform was the largest, spanning 100 miles. There were 3,000 wooden pillars erected on it, each of which was dozens of feet tall. This is the first stage of the Nine Nether Conference. You all know that Saint Luck will appear in this Nine Nether Conference. I've named this first stage Saint Luck Birth. As the name suggests, Saint Luck will be born from this first stage. Chao Rong pointed at the 3 platforms as his loud voice continued to resound, reverberating in everyone's ears. Birth of Saint Luck. Everyone's eyes lit up. There was no doubt that their main purpose in participating in this Nine Nether Conference was Saint Luck. Saint Luck was extremely beneficial to those who had not yet entered the Saint Realm, as well as those who had just entered the profound Saint Realm. There are 3,000 Saint Pillars on the third platform. At noon, Saint Luck will descend from the depths of the Nine Nether Heaven and be distributed among these 3,000 Saint Pillars. Of course, the distribution of the Saint Pillars is not equal. The earlier the Saint Pillars are, the more Saint Luck they can receive. If you want more Saint Luck, then reach the third platform as soon as possible and snatch the Saint Pillars in front. Chao Rong's words were very concise, but it caused the eyes of many participants on the Nine Nether Heaven platform to burn. Guning, go and activate the energy of these 3 platforms. Chao Rong instructed the profound Saint Master beside him. Guning nodded and jumped up, standing above the 3 platforms. He took out origin crystals from his spirit ring, flipped his hands, and immediately began to construct an origin formation that enveloped the 3 platforms. In an instant, the 3 platforms seemed to come alive. Powerful energy soared into the sky and dissipated, causing the surrounding cultivators to feel a throbbing sensation. What powerful energy! Some cultivators' faces changed slightly. After Guning's actions, the platforms were no longer as calm as before, and their auras were much more terrifying than before. You can start now. I have to remind you in advance that only 3,000 people can obtain Saint Luck, but there are tens of thousands of you. As for the third platform, as long as the Saint Luck hasn't been born yet, you can use any method. Chao Rong smiled slyly. Obviously, his words were to remind everyone that fighting for the position of the Saint Pillars didn't prohibit any method, including snatching. Whoosh! Whoosh! As soon as Chao Rong's voice fell, the sound of something breaking through the air rang out. Get lost! What are you doing? How dare you sneak attack me from behind? You're blocking my way. Before entering the platform, there were already many people who had begun to quarrel with each other. Some even started fighting because of it. Zhuowen and Long Tian didn't get involved in this matter. The 2 of them quietly stepped onto the first platform. Zhuowen and Long Tian naturally knew the principle of shooting the bird that pokes its head out, so their positions weren't very close to the front. The ones who were really far ahead were the top geniuses of the 9 Nether Realms and the other elite disciples. The first stage is very simple. You can pass by using brute force to break the energy barrier. Of course, the entrance and exit have to be broken once, so everyone has to break the energy barrier twice, Chao Rong said indifferently. Qing Longzi took the lead and blasted a hole in the energy barrier with his palm. With a swoosh he entered. Yen Ruhua followed closely behind, followed by the other top geniuses of the Nether Realms. However, the one who surprised everyone was Yang Yi of the Divine Nether Realm. Yang Yi was extremely lazy and walked slowly. Even so, Yang Yi's position was very close to the front, in the top 20. Long Tian, let's not stand out too much. This is only the first stage of the Nine Nether Conference. There's no need to expose too much. Zhuowen transmitted his voice to Long Tian. Chapter 1466. The Benefits of Saint Luck. That Qing Longzi is not bad. Most of the people are still on the first platform, but he's far ahead. He's already reached the second platform. Chao Rong's eyes flashed as she muttered to herself. The energy barrier on the first platform was extremely tough. Most of the cultivators who reached the first platform were sent flying back with blood spurting out of their mouths when they punched the barrier. The slightly stronger warriors performed better. They used their special skills to constantly bombard the barrier. However, other than creating some ripples on the barrier, they were unable to break it. Only a small number of warriors were extremely powerful. With a single punch, they were able to create a hole in the energy barrier and successfully enter the first platform. As for the invincible Emperor Lords and half-saint cultivators of the 9 Serenity Realms, their speed was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, a hole as tall as a person had been created. Looks like there are many hidden geniuses in the 9 Serenity Realms. Zhuowen and Long Tian barely broke the energy barrier. The moment they stepped onto the first platform, they were shocked to find that there were almost 100 people faster than them. Most of them were invincible Emperor Lords and half-saints. Terrifying geniuses like Qing Longzi, who was already a saint, had already reached the end of the second platform. Soon, he would reach the third platform. Let's go. Zhuowen and Long Tian didn't waste any time. Without exposing themselves too much, they also broke the exit of the first platform and crossed the cable bridge to reach the second platform. There was a large hall on the second platform. The surface of the hall was filled with saint aura. The front door was open, and it was pitch black inside. As soon as the two entered the hall, they heard a series of screams. Then, they were shocked to find that several high-level emperors ahead of them had mysteriously exploded and died. What's that? Long Tian frowned slightly, clearly confused. Let's go in and take a look, Zhuowen said in a deep voice, and walked into the depths of the hall. However, the moment Zhuowen took a step forward, a dense sound of breaking air suddenly swept over. It was as if there were countless arrows exploding from the surroundings, piercing towards Zhuowen's vital points. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed as he took a few steps forward. Like a ghost, he dodged the countless sounds of the air being torn apart. At the moment when the last wave of air-piercing sound was heard, Zhuowen touched it with his right hand, and then reached out. He found that the air-piercing sound was actually a strange insect. This insect was about the size of a thumb. Its surface was covered with silver scales, and its mouth was as sharp as a needle. At this moment, the worm was lying in Zhuowen's palm, and kept twisting. Its sharp mouth pierced into Zhuowen's flesh, trying to drill into Zhuowen's body. However, this insect was obviously in vain. Zhuowen now had a second-rate divine body. Even if he did not actively activate the power of the divine body, his body was far tougher than an ordinary warrior's. Zhuowen crushed the insect into powder, and said to Long Tian indifferently, "It's just a bunch of useless insects. Come with me." Long Tian nodded, jumped, and immediately followed Zhuowen. Along the way, countless of these strange insects rushed over, wanting to drill into their bodies. However, they were all annihilated by Zhuowen, allowing them to pass through the interior of the hall unimpeded. This scene stunned the people who came later in the hall. That guy actually used his body to resist the strange insects? I remember that a warrior from before, even if he took out a high-level defensive emperor weapon, it was useless. Could it be that these insects are strong in appearance, but weak in reality? Let me try. One of the 7th-level Emperor Realm warriors, who did not believe in heresy, shouted and rushed out. However, before he could get far, countless air-piercing sounds flashed past. Then this warrior directly exploded and died. Hiss! Suddenly, many warriors who gathered at the entrance of the hall, and did not dare to move forward, gasped. Walking out of the hall, Zhuowen saw the third platform in front of him at a glance. There were wooden stakes erected upright there. At this moment, the first 500 wooden stakes had already been occupied. Zhuowen and Long Tian leaped up and landed firmly on the 501st and 502nd wooden stakes, as steady as Mount Tai. Among them, the most eye-catching were undoubtedly the top 20 wooden stakes. Among them, Qing Longzi occupied the first wooden stake, Yen Ruhuo was second, Yang Yi was third, and the desolate island Guisha was fourth. Then the desolate island Zemowen was fifth, and Lu Hantian was sixth. What surprised Zhuowen was that Lu Hantian had become a saint at some point. The saint aura that faintly leaked out was extremely terrifying. Zhuowen's other clone, Buddha Wen, was on the 13th wooden stake. Wu Dai was on the 15th wooden stake, and Taiyamo Lord was on the 17th wooden stake. Among the top 20 wooden stakes, the Dragon Nether Realm occupied 4. The Divine Nether Realm had 3. The Desolate Nether Realm had 3. The Demon Nether Realm had 3. The Flower Nether Realm had 2. And the other Nether Realms had 1 each. However, the Martial Nether Realm naturally did not have a single one. After all, the top geniuses of the Martial Nether Realm had been completely wiped out by Zhuowen. The two of them had no intention of fighting for the wooden stakes in front of them. Zhuowen was very clear that this was only the first stage of the 9 nether meet. The amount of Saint Luck 1 obtained here did not have much to do with the amount of Saint Luck 1 obtained in the end. After all, the one who had the last laugh was the ultimate winner. Zhuowen was very clear that the last few stages of the 9 nether meet were the most important ones. As time passed, many cultivators arrived one after another. After all, not every cultivator's speed was as fast as Qinglongzi's. Outside the 9 nether sky platform, the leaders of the 9 nether realms were all smiling. However, the martial nether realms, Wu Ho's face was extremely ugly. This was because their martial nether realm occupied very few spots among the 3,000 wooden stakes. Moreover, they were all at the back. There was no doubt that they would obtain very little saint luck. Damn that Zhuowen! Wu Ho was filled with hatred. If it wasn't for Zhuowen, their martial nether realm wouldn't be in such a sorry state. This time, there wasn't a single person in the top 100. It was simply too embarrassing. Especially when he saw the mocking gazes of the other nether realm leaders. Wu Ho wished that he could dig a hole and hide in it. It's almost noon. Everyone, please wait patiently. The Saint Luck is about to appear, Chao Rong said indifferently. When these words came out, many of the cultivators on the wooden stakes were extremely excited. Zhuowen and Long Tian were no exception. However, after the excitement, Zhuowen looked around and frowned slightly. This was because he couldn't sense any heavenly insect's aura among the 3,000 people. Logically speaking, the heavenly insect shouldn't have missed the 9 nether conference. Why can't I even sense a trace of its aura? Zhuowen muttered to himself helplessly. Moreover, Zhuowen also noticed that Chao Rong of the Primal Chaos Temple was also carefully sizing up everyone present. Although he looked indifferent, Zhuowen could feel that Chao Rong was probably looking for something. It seems that the Primal Chaos Temple has really found traces of the heavenly insect. Otherwise, they wouldn't have sent a heavenly Saint Realm Saint and a profound Saint Master, Zhuowen thought to himself. Although Zhuowen really wanted to tell Chao Rong that the heavenly insect avatar was being protected by the Blue Dragon Hall, he didn't dare to do so now. After all, the Immortal Saint artifact on him was too attractive to many people. At that time, before he could say anything about the heavenly insect, he would get into trouble instead. The gains would not make up for the losses. In fact, what he was most worried about now was that after 5 years, he didn't know how strong the heavenly insect had become. It's noon. Chao Rong's resounding voice suddenly rang out. Immediately, the 3,000 cultivators on the wooden stakes all raised their heads, their eyes filled with excitement. Even the lazy-looking Yang Yi raised his head as a playful smile appeared in his eyes. Boom! A dazzling golden light shot out from the depths of the 9 nether heaven. This golden light was very strange. Even the pitch-black 9 nether heaven was dyed an endless golden color by this golden light. The golden light shot out very quickly and instantly reached the sky above the 9 nether sky platform. Is this Saint Luck? Zhuowen muttered softly as he looked at the golden light that had almost dyed the entire 9 nether heaven golden. However, his gaze wasn't on the golden light, but on the depths of the 9 nether heaven where the golden light had come from. How exactly was this so-called Saint Luck born in the endless void? Zhuowen was very curious. Boom! Endless golden light spread across the sky above the 9 serene sky platform. Soon after, it suddenly exploded and turned into rays of golden light. At the same time, the surface of the wooden stakes on the 3rd platform lit up with complicated runes. The power of the runes soared into the sky like a giant hand, sucking the countless rays of golden light into the wooden stakes. The wooden stake Zhuowen was on also surged with rune power. Moreover, Zhuowen discovered that the closer to the wooden stake, the stronger the rune power was, and the more rays of golden light it could absorb. The rune power quickly returned, bringing with it a ray of golden light. The rune power returned to the wooden stake, and the golden light surged into Zhuowen's body. After that, Zhuowen discovered that as the golden light poured into his body, his comprehension of the laws in his body was suddenly enlightened. The doubts he had about the laws in the past were completely dispelled at this moment, as if he had entered a state of enlightenment. Is this the effect of Saint Luck? Zhuowen's eyes flashed with a trace of surprise. No wonder everyone said that Saint Luck could help one become a saint. So this was the case. When the Saint Luck poured into his body, it could actually deepen his comprehension of the laws in his body. As his comprehension of the laws deepened, it naturally wouldn't be difficult for him to break through to the saint realm. After all, breaking through to the saint realm only required an opportunity, and this opportunity was to have a deep enough comprehension of the laws and be able to master it. This trace of Saint Luck isn't enough. If I can obtain more Saint Luck, perhaps my comprehension of the laws will be several times, dozens of times, or even hundreds of times more profound than it is now. Chapter 1467. Seizing Saint Luck. After obtaining the benefits of Saint Luck, Zhuowen's thirst for Saint Luck increased. He knew that as long as he could gather more Saint Luck, his chances of becoming a saint would increase. Not only Zhuowen, but the other cultivators who had obtained Saint Luck also looked greedy. They glanced at the other cultivators, as if they were looking at prey. Boom! Boom! Suddenly, dozens of light pillars shot up into the sky continuously from the wooden stake. The aura emitted by these light pillars was extremely vast and terrifying. Someone has broken through. Many cultivators on the wooden pillars were astonished. They raised their heads and looked at the dozens of people who had rushed out of the light pillars. It seems that the Saint Luck has allowed these people to comprehend cosmic energy. They're probably going to break through to the Great Emperor realm. Zhuowen glanced at the dozens of people. Without exception, they were all ninth-layer Great Emperors. They hadn't comprehended cosmic energy. However, the power of Saint Luck had allowed them to comprehend the mysteries of cosmic energy. They had broken through to the Great Emperor realm. Cosmic energy is descending from the sky. It seems that the breakthrough is going to end soon. Someone exclaimed. Indeed, dozens of cosmic energy had descended from the sky. Most of them were elemental cosmic energy. However, there were two people who attracted the attention of many people. These two people didn't comprehend elemental cosmic energy, but special cosmic energy. One of them was a young man in his early 20s. The cosmic energy above his head contained a destructive qi. The cosmic energy he comprehended was the same as Fu Yu of the Divine Devil Peak, of the excellent Divine College. It was also the law of destruction. The destructive qi it contained was terrifying. The other person had countless sword shadows above his head. These sword shadows revealed an incomparably sharp qi. It was a special sword cosmic energy. Looking at these two people, Zhuowen smiled. These two people were his old friends. The one who comprehended the law of destruction was Jianan, and the one who comprehended the law of sword was Mo Lingtian. In the past few years, the two of them had improved very quickly, especially Mo Lingtian. Although he was talented at the beginning, there was still a gap between him and Jianan and Gatha. However, Mo Lingtian didn't fall behind Jianan because of his talent. Instead, he was on par with Jianan. They were both ninth-layer Great Emperors. Now, because of the Saint Luck, he had comprehended cosmic energy and become a Great Emperor realm expert. As for Moyan Wuxiang and Jia Sha, their cultivation was much higher than Jianan's and Mo Lingtian's. They had already reached the half-saint realm. Jia Sha's cultivation was originally the lowest among them, but now she had surpassed the others and become the strongest. Qingyin didn't participate in this 9 Netherworld conference because her cultivation was stuck at the peak of the 6th layer Great Emperor realm. Until now, She hadn't broken through to the high-level Great Emperor realm. She wasn't even qualified to climb the heavenly stairway, let alone obtain Saint Luck. The dozens of people who had comprehended the law of Saint Luck were envied by many people, especially those who couldn't reach the third platform and were eliminated. Their hearts were bleeding. Everyone who has obtained the Saint Luck should have tasted the benefits of the Saint Luck, right? Chao Rong stood in the sky, the corners of his mouth slightly raised as he said indifferently. The people standing on the wooden pillars all nodded their heads, as an additional fervent look appeared in their eyes. Even Qing Longzi, who was standing on the first wooden pillar, had a trace of fervent look in his eyes. Haha, this is only the first stage. The second stage is to increase your Saint Luck. Now follow me. After Chao Rong finished speaking, he and Guning stepped into the sky and flew towards the west. The 3,000 cultivators standing on the wooden pillars looked at each other, then immediately flew down the wooden pillars and followed closely behind. The Saint Luck from the depths of 9 netherworld heaven had all been shared by them. Naturally, they wouldn't stand on the wooden pillars like idiots anymore. The western region was thousands of miles wide, and it was filled with many different landscapes. There were deserts, plains, forests, and mountains. It was a small natural world. Chao Rong and Guning floated in the air above this natural world. The 3,000 cultivators behind them also stopped behind the two of them, staring at the natural world below in amazement. What was strange was that there were actually 30 huge arenas in this natural world. The arenas were distributed quite evenly. There were arenas in deserts, plains, forests, and mountains, and the landscape of each arena was different. There are 30 arenas in this natural world. Each arena is extremely wide. There are 3,000 of you. So if you divide them evenly, there will be 100 people in each arena. The rules of the second stage are actually very simple. That is, the arena points system. Each of you has an initial score of 1 point. Every person you defeat will add 1 point, and every defeat will deduct 1 point. The result is that the points will be ranked from highest to lowest, and the top 100 will advance to the next round. Chao Rong said indifferently. The 3,000 cultivators nodded repeatedly. The rules of the points ranking were obviously quite fair. After all, it was obviously unfair to use a 2-on-1 elimination system in the arena battles. After all, if two powerful geniuses were to encounter each other in advance, one of them would definitely be eliminated. This was not beneficial to the progress of the arena battles. However, the point system was much better. It didn't matter even if one lost a match. As long as one's total score was in the top 100, they wouldn't be eliminated. This rule was obviously more advantageous to the stronger geniuses. Everyone should have no objections to the rules, right? Chao Rong said indifferently. The 3,000 cultivators looked at each other, but no one spoke. Obviously, there were no objections. In that case, let's start drawing lots. The 30 arenas have their own numbers, from 1 to 30. Whichever number you draw, you will go to that arena. After Chao Rong finished speaking, he waved his sleeve. Suddenly, countless light sticks flew out from his hand and landed in the hands of the 3,000 cultivators. Zhuowen flipped his right hand, and the number 7 was written on the light stick in his hand. Looks like it's arena number 7, Zhuowen thought to himself. Everyone should know your own number, right? Now let's go to our respective arenas. As soon as Chao Rong finished speaking, the 3,000 cultivators flew out and entered the natural world to find their respective arenas. Arena number 7 is over there. Zhuowen's eyes immediately locked on an arena in the depths of the forest. He kicked his right foot and rushed toward the depths of the forest like a streamer. There was a large open space in the depths of the forest. On the open space, there was an arena made of green mound stone. At this moment, there was a large number of cultivators gathered below the arena. Obviously, they had all drawn lots to be placed in arena number 7. Zhuowen did not attract anyone's attention when he landed below the arena. As for Long Tian, who was beside him, he had drawn arena number 9, which was in the adjacent desert. The top geniuses of the 9 netherworld realm also landed below their respective arenas. Among them, Qing Longzi was in arena number 1, Yang Yi in arena number 2, Yen Ruhua in Arena number 3, Lu Hantian in Arena number 4, Flower Fairy in Arena number 5, Mo Wen in Arena number 6, Shueizhou in Arena number 7, Sha Zi in Arena number 8, Yiksha in Arena number 9, Yun Ran in Arena number 10, and Gui Sha in Arena number 11. Zhuowen paid more attention to Wu Dai in Arena number 15, Fo Wen in Arena number 17, Mo Yin Wushang in Arena number 20, and Gatha in Arena number 21. Generally speaking, those with higher strength would be assigned to different arenas. Obviously, this was deliberately arranged by Chao Rong. Although this natural world was extremely large and Zhuowen's Arena number 7 was in the depths of the forest, the cultivators present were not weak. They were all cultivators at the peak of the 9 netherworld realm. With their eyesight and mental energy, they could naturally see the entire natural world. The situation of the other arenas was no exception. Many of the martial warriors below the 7th arena looked at one of the figures standing proudly with fear in their eyes. This person was a 29-year-old man, wearing a black windbreaker. His hair was very long, almost reaching his waist. His eyes contained a trace of deathly stillness. This person was the number 1 genius of the nether realm, Shueizhou. The aura on his body was as vast as the sea, but it contained a deathly stillness, as if this person was a dead man. The other cultivators in the 7th arena kept a distance from him, not daring to get too close. In addition to the fear in their hearts, it was also the influence of the faintly discernible deathly stillness. Shueizhou raised his chin slightly. His gaze was not on the other cultivators in the 7th arena, but on the top geniuses in the other arenas. He knew very well that in the 7th arena, he was the king. No one could beat him. His real opponents were the top geniuses of the 9 netherworld realm. This arena battle is also related to how much saint luck you have in your body. If you win, in addition to gaining 1 point, you can also take a part of your opponent's saint luck and integrate it into yourself. Therefore, I prefer to call this stage seizing saint luck. Chao Rong's voice rang out once again, reverberating throughout the space. This caused the originally quiet warriors to burst into an uproar. After tasting the great benefits of saint luck, their desire for it was like a hungry wolf that had seen its prey. It can actually take away saint luck. This is not bad. Shueizhou was also moved. His gaze fell on the other cultivators in the 7th arena for the first time. However, his eyes were not filled with the joy of meeting an opponent, but with the greed of seeing prey. There was no doubt that he regarded the other 99 cultivators in the 7th arena as prey that could devour saint luck. I've been treated as prey. What a failure. Zhuowen licked his lips and sneered in his heart. Shueizhou regarded the others as prey, but he did not know that he had already been targeted by Zhuowen. The second stage of seizing saint luck is about to begin. My clone will be the referee in your arena. Chapter 1468. Arena Competition 1 split into 30. Seeing Chao Rong display this move, many martial artists' eyes were moved. At their level of cultivation, creating clones was not considered a rare secret technique. However, to be able to create 30 clones at once was a little powerful. This Chao Rong was indeed a heavenly saint-level powerhouse. Whoosh! The 30 clones landed on the 30 arenas. Chao Rong was expressionless, and his gaze was cold. On the 7th arena, Chao Rong glanced at the remaining martial artists below the arena and continued. Before the competition begins, I will give you a number. As he spoke, Chao Rong waved his sleeve, and 100 light spots appeared. The light spots landed on Zhuowen's chest, and the number 15 appeared on his chest. I will decide your opponent. I will draw lots to pair you up. The first round, number 1 versus number 75. Just as Chao Rong finished speaking, 2 young men flew out from below the arena. The 2 of them looked at each other cautiously, as the origin energy in their bodies surged. The 2 of them weren't weak. They were both around the 8th Heaven Emperor realm. Begin, Chao Rong announced indifferently. Immediately, light spots shot out from the glabella of the 2 of them, as they activated their respective armor souls. From their attire, one could tell that one of them should be a core disciple of the Divine College, while the other should be a disciple of the Blue Dragon Hall. Both of them had similar cultivation levels. Naturally, they wanted to end the battle quickly from the start and use their strongest trump cards. Otherwise, it would be a waste of energy if the battle dragged on. After all, there were still many battles to be fought. Boom, boom, boom. The two of them quickly launched their attacks. Powerful shockwaves from the collision affected the entire space around the arena. After dozens of exchanges, the disciple of the Divine Academy was slightly inferior. The disciple of the Azure Dragon Hall found an opening and punched out, heavily smashing into the chest of the Divine Academy disciple. Pfft! The disciple of the Divine College spat out a mouthful of blood and flew out with a groan. Victory for number 1. Chao Rong was expressionless. Just as he finished speaking, a ray of light shot out from the defeated disciple of the Divine College and entered the body of the Blue Dragon Hall's disciple. Due to the golden ray of light, the disciple of the Blue Dragon Hall clenched his fists and looked excited. A golden light spot started to appear between his glabella. Zhuowen looked at the scene and pondered. The moment the Divine College's Blue Dragon Hall's disciple, he could feel the saint aura from the Blue Dragon Hall's disciple became more obvious and stronger. That was the effect of the saint luck. On the other hand, the saint luck of the disciple who had failed was extremely dim. It was obvious that most of his saint luck had been taken away by the Azure Dragon Hall disciple. The eyes of Shueisha, the strongest person in the 7th arena, lit up like never before. He murmured, "Stealing saint luck?" Studio number 15. After a battle ended, Chao Rong spoke again. Zhuowen took a step forward and directly leaped onto the arena. At this moment, on the other side of the stage, a man who looked to be in his 30s also jumped onto the stage. A disciple of the League of Assassins? Zhuowen looked at the kill word on the man's chest and immediately knew that this man was a disciple of the League of Assassins. When Zhuowen was attacked by the 6 saints, he had used his demon Dao doppelganger to investigate the situation of the other secluded realms. He had a good understanding of the various secluded realms. The strength of the disciple of the League of Assassins was only at the 8th level Great Emperor realm. In the League of Assassins, he could only be considered above average. "You've concealed your cultivation?" As soon as the man came up, he realized that he couldn't see through the cultivation of the young man in front of him. "Begin." Chao Rong glanced at Zhuowen, because even he couldn't sense the specific cultivation of the young man in front of him. However, he was sure that the young man in front of him had not reached the Saint realm. What an interesting young man. It seems that his concealment secret technique is quite advanced. Even I can't see through it. Chao Rong thought to himself. However, he didn't pay too much attention to it. After all, there was a huge difference between a Saint realm cultivator and a Saint realm cultivator. Although Zhuowen's concealment secret technique wasn't bad, his main focus was on the few geniuses who had become saints. "Remember my name. I'm Wei Han. Otherwise, you won't know who killed you when you go to hell." Whoosh! After saying that, Wei Han released his armor soul. He was very cautious. Although he knew that Zhuowen had used a concealment technique, he didn't dare to be careless. His armor soul was a cloud of black mist. As soon as the cloud of black mist appeared, it attached itself to his body. Then, Wei Han's aura became indistinct, and he immediately disappeared from the spot. So fast. Although Wei Han's cultivation is only at the 8th level Great Emperor realm, his assassination technique is probably a threat to a 9th level Great Emperor realm cultivator. Below the arena, many cultivators revealed looks of amazement. Clearly, Wei Han's performance was quite stunning. Whoosh! Another air-rending sound rang out. Behind Zhuowen, a cloud of black mist suddenly spread out. Then, a right hand holding a dagger directly swept towards Zhuowen's neck. Zhuowen remained as still as a mountain. When the dagger was about to reach him, he only threw out a light punch. He did not use any cultivation method or martial arts. He did not even use any secret techniques. It was just a simple and unadorned punch. This guy is too arrogant. He didn't even use a technique. On the stage, many cultivators secretly shook their heads. Even Chao Rong had a mocking look on his face. Crack! When the punch was thrown out, the sound of bones cracking could be heard. Then, a heart-wrenching scream came from the cloud of black mist. Wei Han actually held his right arm as he retreated and landed outside the arena. However, just as Wei Han was about to land outside the ring, Zhuo Wen's right hand hooked and grabbed Wei Han's right hand like an eagle's claw. Then his left fist, which had been accumulating power, flew out with a rumble. Puchi! The punch landed on Wei Han's chest. Suddenly, Wei Han spat out a mouthful of blood. His body collapsed and turned into a cloud of blood mist. As soon as Wei Han died, the saint luck on his body seemed to have lost its owner and rushed to Zhuo Wen's body. At the same time, a golden dot of light appeared between Zhuo Wen's eyebrows. Since Wei Han was a disciple of the League of Assassins and had threatened to kill him, Zhuo Wen naturally wouldn't show any mercy. Of course, as long as it was a disciple of the Blue Dragon Hall, 100 Flowers Park, Undying Altar, League of Assassins and Yixia, Zhuo Wen wouldn't let any of them go. Especially Shueisha, who was the strongest person on the 7th stage, Zhuo Wen wouldn't let him go. Hiss! Looking at Wei Han who had died without an intact corpse, many people sucked in a breath of cold air as they stared at Zhuo Wen in fear. Who is this guy? He's so ruthless. He actually killed him. Chao Rong's eyes were calm. Before the battle began, he didn't say anything to stop Shueisha from killing. Shueisha, who was standing quietly at the same spot, narrowed his eyes and took another look at Zhuo Wen. A cold smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. The battle continued. It was inevitable that there would be some casualties in this kind of battle. In addition, Chao Rong didn't forbid killing, so the battle was extremely intense. Among the many stages, the most ruthless battle was in the 6th stage. The strongest person on this stage was Mo, one from the Barren Island. Most of the time, Mo would take someone's life. However, if one looked carefully, they would see that Mo Wen's targets were very regular. Basically, he would choose the disciples of the Blue Dragon Hall, Undying Altar, 100 Flowers Park, League of Assassins and Yixia. Of course, because there were 5 forces, no one paid too much attention to it. Not only Mo1, but Mo1 from the Great Lane Temple, Mo Lingtian, Jianan Gatha, Mo Yen Wushang, and even Lu Hantian from the Saint Physique all had the same goal. They were all targeting the disciples of the 5 major forces. As the competition continued, the leaders of the 5 major factions finally realized that something was amiss. This was because in their respective factions, other than a few top and elite disciples, the other weaker disciples were all dead. Looks like the disciples of the Jiaxin Academy have a good relationship with Zhuo Wen. They actually dared to kill the disciples of the Blue Dragon Hall. Sapphire Shore said with a slightly ugly expression. I heard that Yin Ji's new disciple, Lu Hantian, has the saint physique and has already become a saint. He's very powerful. This guy is the one who killed the most crazily. Moreover, he seems to be targeting the disciples of the Blue Dragon Hall. Elder Raiwa said indifferently. They're all little bastards related to Zhuo Wen. Sapphire Shore quickly calmed down. The people that Lu Hantian and the others killed were all unimportant characters of the Blue Dragon Hall. It wasn't a pity that he died. If possible, he would send a sound transmission to Qinglongzi. At that time, if he encountered these people, he wouldn't be merciful and would kill them all. Also, the Mo when on the deserted island seems to be targeting the 5 major forces. Raiwa looked at the Mo when on the 6th stage with some doubt and frowned. Sapphire Shore didn't think too much about it and said indifferently, Mo1 has always been unscrupulous. They kill whenever they want. The Mo1's Mo-chi is monstrous and unruly. I'm afraid it's normal for him to kill his opponents. Number 85 against number 32. On the 7th stage, Chao Rong shouted again. Shueisha suddenly jumped up and landed on the stage. It's Shueisha from the Undying Sacred Altar in the Netherworld realm. His cultivation is at the Half-Step Saint realm. He's very powerful. When Shueisha went up, it immediately caused an uproar in the crowd. They were chattering like little birds, and looked at Shueisha's opponent with pity. I give up. Shueisha's opponent was a rogue cultivator. He frowned, and immediately gave up without even fighting. After he gave up, a part of his saint luck suddenly separated and entered Shueisha's body. After Shueisha's battle ended, it was finally Zhuo Wen's turn. Number 15 Wen Zhuo against number 37 Lu Yang. Chapter 1469. Bombardment. Following that, Zhuo Wen won extremely easily. He basically didn't use any moves. When others attacked, he just threw out a punch and destroyed all of their attacks. Soon, Zhuo Wen obtained 50 consecutive victories. This Wen Zhuo's physical body is really impressive. Until now, I haven't seen him use any techniques, armor soul, or other techniques. Below the stage, many martial warriors looked at Zhuo Wen's back with fear in their eyes. Originally, Zhuo Wen was unknown, and no one even noticed him. However, as the battles continued, everyone finally noticed Zhuo Wen's extraordinariness. Especially Zhuo Wen's physical body. It was the topic of everyone below the arena. In addition, Zhuo Wen sometimes didn't show any mercy. Therefore, after 50 victories, many cultivators who met Zhuo Wen directly forfeited. Of course, those who forfeited were basically cultivators with strength below the invincible sovereign lord level. Among the 100 people in the 7th arena, most of them had this strength. There were only 5 people whose strength was above the invincible sovereign lord level. Shueisha was one of them, and he was a half-saint. Other than Shueisha, there was another person who was a rogue cultivator without a sect. As for the other 3, 2 of them were core disciples of the Blue Dragon Hall, Wu Lan and Zheng Tang. The other person was a disciple of the League of Assassins Shi Yi. Among the 5 people, other than the rogue cultivator without a sect, the other 4 were all staring at Zhuo Wen with unfriendly gazes. This was because during the competition, many of their senior and junior brothers had been killed by Zhuo Wen with a single punch. When Chao Rong reported to Zhuo Wen again, Zhuo Wen threw out another punch and directly blasted his opponent out of the arena. The result was as expected, clean and neat. Following that, Zhuo Wen continued his winning streak. After winning over 70 matches in a row, he finally met a heavyweight opponent. The golden light on Zhuo Wen's forehead became even more intense. Gradually it condensed into a golden pattern. The golden pattern rushed up to the sky like a golden sword. In the 7th arena, only Shueisha and the other 4 had also condensed golden runes. This was especially true for Shueisha. The golden rune between his eyebrows was extremely bright, and there were signs of it forming a second golden rune. Wu Lan stood quietly on one side of the stage, staring at Zhuo Wen. She sneered and said, "I finally met you. I saw that you had a great time killing our Blue Dragon Hall's disciples. You killed them all with a single punch. If you have the ability, why don't you try killing me with a single punch?" As she spoke, Wu Lan's gaze was filled with provocation. Everyone below the arena shook their heads inwardly. This Wu Lan was an invincible emperor lord, and had grasped a type of law power. He wasn't someone an ordinary martial artist could compare to. Although Wen Zhuo's strength was strong enough, killing an invincible emperor lord with a single punch was too exaggerated. Unless he was a half-saint, it was impossible to do so. Shueisha and the other 3 invincible martial emperors also had a mocking look in their eyes. Even Chao Rong had a look of interest on her face. Speaking of which, up until now, Wen Zhuo had only used a single punch to kill his opponent in every battle. Other than when his opponent admitted defeat, he had never used a second move. "Do you think you're qualified for me to use a second punch?" Zhuo Wen said indifferently. Then he threw out another punch. However, what the crowd didn't notice was that on the surface of Zhuo Wen's fist, there were traces of golden veins. He had used a trace of the Saint Physique's power. What? He had only used a single punch. Below the arena, the crowd was in an uproar. Zhuo Wen's words were too arrogant. If Zhuo Wen was facing an ordinary high-level Emperor Realm martial artist, they wouldn't be surprised if he only used a single punch. But now, Wen Zhuo's opponent was an invincible Emperor Lord, and he only planned to use a single punch. Wasn't he too arrogant? As the referee, Chao Rong's eyelids twitched. He was extremely surprised. Facing an invincible Emperor Lord, Wen Zhuo only used a single punch. Either there was something wrong with his head, or Wen Zhuo was extremely confident in his own strength. The smile on Wu Lan's face froze, as if he had been slapped hard in the face. His provocative words were naturally a joke. He didn't think that Wenjue would only use a single punch to deal with him. But now, Wenjue still only used a single punch. It was undoubtedly a slap to his face. How arrogant. Let's see how arrogant you can be after I beat you to the ground. Wu Lan was so angry that he laughed. A violent wind swept up around him, and the wind grew stronger and stronger. In the end, it soared into the sky and parted the dark clouds. Junior brother Wu Lan has mastered the law of wind. This law can be used for both offense and defense. It's quite powerful. At the same time, Zheng Tang, a disciple of the Blue Dragon Hall, crossed his arms and sneered. Wind Dragon. The moment the law of wind swept out, Wu Lan flipped his hands. Suddenly, a violent storm swept up a huge wind dragon. With a roar, it swept towards Zhuowen. Boom! Zhuowen still used a single punch. Without any changes, his fist landed on the wind dragon. Immediately, the seemingly terrifying wind dragon collapsed inch by inch. Zhuowen's fist didn't lose its momentum. It continued to sweep forward and heavily smashed into Wu Lan's chest. No! Wu Lan let out a blood-curdling scream. This seemingly light punch, when it landed on his body, seemed to contain the force of 1,000 caddies. Then his internal organs began to overturn. His physical body began to rupture as a bloody mist burst out and exploded with a rumble. Swoosh! The moment Wu Lan died, the golden rune between his eyebrows separated and fell on Zhuowen's body. Then, a golden light flashed between Zhuowen's eyebrows. Finally, a second golden rune was derived. A powerful saint aura flowed out of Zhuowen's body. Saint Luck. Zhuowen closed his eyes and felt the benefits brought by the saint luck. He began to have a new level of comprehension of the 5 laws of ice, fire, void, desolation and death in his body. Not enough, I need more saint luck. Zhuowen shook his head, a trace of greed in his eyes. Although with the help of the saint luck, his understanding of the 5 laws in his body had deepened, but there was still a distance to the opportunity for a breakthrough. The entire arena became incomparably silent. Everyone stared blankly at Wu Lan, who had exploded into countless blood mist. Their mouths were agape, but no words came out. As the referee, Chao Rong couldn't help but be stunned. 1 punch. This kid really killed Wu Lan with 1 punch. There wasn't even a trace of him left. How can there be such a terrifying physical body in this world? The strength of the physical body can withstand the power of the laws? Chao Rong thought in his heart, but his eyes were fixed on Zhuowen. He found that the young man in front of him gave him a feeling that he couldn't see through him. Of course, he was also getting more and more interested. Bastard, you actually killed junior brother Wu Lan? You're simply courting death. Zheng Tang, who was sneering, completely froze. He stared at Zhuowen with a ferocious expression. Idiot. If you have the ability, come up and avenge your junior brother, Zhuowen said indifferently. Zheng Tang immediately fell silent. He was also an invincible sovereign lord. Although he was Wu Lan's senior brother, his strength wasn't that high. If Wenjue could kill Wu Lan, then naturally, he could also kill him. Interesting. Looks like Wenjue's cultivation should be at the half-saint level. Otherwise, it's impossible for him to kill Wu Lan so easily. Shueizhi frowned. He was also at the half-saint level. It wasn't difficult for him to defeat and kill Wu Lan. However, it was a little difficult for him to kill Wu Lan with 1 punch like Zhuowen. Thinking of this, Shueizhi began to take Wenjue seriously for the first time. Crack! Sapphire Shore clenched his right hand, producing a cracking sound. He stared at the 9th underworld sky platform with a dark gaze. Wu Lan's death on the 7th ring naturally attracted Sapphire Shore's attention. Wu Lan was an invincible sovereign lord. Even in the Blue Dragon Hall, such a genius disciple could be counted with 2 hands. It wasn't easy to nurture one. Who is that kid? I remember that kid from the 7th ring also tried to kill the disciples of our Blue Dragon Hall, right? Sapphire Shore asked the higher-ups of the Blue Dragon Hall behind him. According to the information from the 7th ring, his name seems to be Wenjue. Similar to those from the Fine Gods Institute, He also seems to be targeting the disciples of the 5 major powers. This kid's actions are very suspicious. Moreover, it's said that he's a rogue cultivator. One of the old men said respectfully. Sapphire Shore's eyes slowly narrowed as he muttered to himself. His name is Wenjua? And he's targeting the disciples of the 5 major powers? Moreover, he's a rogue cultivator who doesn't belong to any sect. This guy. Speaking of this, Sapphire Shore's eyes emitted a wisp of killing intent. He had already guessed Wenjua's identity, but he didn't say it out loud. Instead, his expression returned to normal. Wenjua is Zhuowen in reverse. Looks like this kid is Zhuowen in disguise. This kid has guts. He actually dares to come to the 9 Netherworld Assembly, Sapphire Shore thought to himself. Originally, Sapphire Shore should have taken action the moment he discovered Zhuowen. However, he didn't. That was because the 9 Netherworld platform was controlled by Chao Rong. The latter was a member of the Primal Chaos Shrine. Furthermore, Sapphire Shore already had a huge plan in mind. Once this plan succeeded, not only would he be able to capture that little bastard Zhuowen, but the entire 9 Netherworld realm would also be in his pocket. I'll let this little bastard jump around for a while longer. After the plan is carried out, this kid will definitely die. Sapphire Shore's eyes emitted a cold light as he thought to himself. It wasn't only Sapphire Shore who noticed Zhuowen. Some of the other leaders of the Nether Realm also began to notice Zhuowen. Especially when they saw Zhuowen kill Wu Lan with a single punch, they all revealed looks of astonishment. However, they didn't link Wenjua and Zhuowen together like Sapphire Shore. After all, in terms of familiarity, Sapphire Shore understood Zhuowen better. So he was able to quickly link the two together. On the square platform of the martial Nether Realm, Wu Ho frowned. He felt that Wenjua was somewhat similar. However, at first glance, Wenjua's aura was extremely unfamiliar. Wu Ho couldn't be sure. I'm afraid I'm overthinking things. Chapter 1470. Ruthless. Each of the 30 arenas was assigned to 100 people. Currently, there were only 4 people with a winning streak in the 7th arena. They were Zhuowen, who used the alias Wenjua, Zheng Tang from the Blue Dragon Hall, Shi from the League of Assassins, and Shueisha from the Undying Altar. Originally, there were 5 people with a winning streak, and the 5th was Wu Lan. However, Wu Lan had just been killed by Zhuowen in the arena. Everyone in the 7th arena fell into silence at this moment. They looked at the young man standing in the center of the arena with fear and respect in their eyes. Who is this Wenjua? He's so terrifying that he even killed Wu Lan with a single punch. It wasn't just the 7th arena. The cultivators in the other arenas also began to pay attention to the situation in the 7th arena. In the 9 Nether meet, those who could stand out from hundreds of thousands of people and advance to the top 3,000 were all elites among elites. Even if their cultivation wasn't high, they still had the strength to fight above their level. Moreover, the natural world wasn't vast. Therefore, the cultivators participating in the arena battles in every corner of this world could clearly see the various situations in the other arenas. Generally, in the arenas, the battles between the strong would attract the attention of many other cultivators. At the beginning, although the battle between Zhuowen and Wu Lan had attracted the attention of some people, there weren't many who paid attention to it. However, when Zhuowen casually threw out a punch and instantly killed Wu Lan, the attention of most of the cultivators in the natural world fell on the 7th arena. The 7th arena Wenjua. Qing Longzi stood quietly in the 1st arena. His opponent had just admitted defeat. In addition to the commotion caused by the surrounding cultivators, his gaze also fell on Zhuowen, who was in the 7th arena. In addition, Wu Lan, who had been instantly killed, was a core disciple of the Blue Dragon Hall. Although Qing Longzi's eyes were as calm as an ancient well, from his slightly clenched hands, one could see that his heart was actually far from as calm as he appeared to be. Turning his head slightly, Zhuowen's gaze fell on Qing Longzi in the 1st arena. Instantly, the two of them looked at each other, and sparks flew between them. I'll remember you. Qing Longzi's mouth moved slightly, but no sound came out. However, Zhuowen was able to read his lips. Zhuowen just smiled and didn't care too much. Since he planned to take revenge on the 5 great forces during the 9 Underworld Conference, he was already prepared for the risk of being exposed. Now that he was standing out, he would naturally attract the attention of others. Fortunately, the 9 Underworld Conference was hosted by the Primal Chaos Temple. The leaders of the other forces did not have the right to approach the 9 Underworld Sky platform. Hence, Zhuowen was not worried about being recognized. Even if he was recognized, the leaders of those forces couldn't do anything to him. As for the juniors of the 5 major forces, there were very few who could threaten him. As Xiaochen walked down the arena, the many cultivators below consciously made way for him, their eyes filled with reverence. He even dared to kill Wu Lan, a core disciple of the Blue Dragon Hall. This young man was definitely an unbridled ruthless person. At present, no one dared to provoke such a ruthless person. Let the battle continue. After coming back to his senses, Chao Rong calmly announced the continuation of the competition. Boom, boom, boom. The competition continued. At present, everyone in the 7th arena had fought close to 80 battles. There were only about 20 battles left. In the 81st battle, Shueisha and Zheng Tang of the Blue Dragon Hall met. In the arena, the two faced each other. Zheng Tang's eyes were filled with fear as he said, "Brother Shueisha, let me have a taste of your strength." Shueisha looked at Zheng Tang indifferently and said, "Brother Zheng, in order to leave you some face, you should admit defeat. Otherwise, you will lose miserably." Hearing this, Zheng Tang's expression changed slightly. He said with some dissatisfaction, "Although Brother Shueisha is a half-saint, I think I am still qualified to fight with Shueisha." Shueisha revealed a subtle smile and said, "Since that is the case, you can make your move." Ha! Zheng Tang didn't waste any time. He took a step forward, and clusters of green vines immediately surged out from his body like countless green pythons. Zheng Tang had mastered the law of wood, the same as Long Tian. "Be careful." As Zheng Tang spoke, he leaped up and stepped on the green vines. The countless disorderly vines intertwined and finally condensed into a giant green dragon. As the name suggested, many of the cultivation techniques of the Blue Dragon Hall were related to dragons. Therefore, even the attacks of the law would choose to imitate a giant dragon. Shueisha stood in place with his eyelids lowered. He was as still as a mountain. The moment the giant green dragon appeared in front of him, Shueisha reached out with his right hand. An aura of death lingered, and then a giant hand more terrifying than the giant dragon suddenly appeared behind him. Boom! The giant hand grabbed the giant green dragon. The giant dragon was like a small snake. It was pinched by the giant hand and slammed into the ground, causing the entire ground to tremble violently. Spiderweb-like cracks spread out from the center of the giant green dragon. On the other hand, Zheng Tang spat out a mouthful of blood and was suddenly sent flying, smashing heavily below the arena. "Thank you for showing mercy, Brother Shueisha." Zheng Tang hurriedly got up and looked at Shueisha gratefully. Shueisha had held back just now. Otherwise, he would have been seriously injured, and not just lightly injured. Shueisha nodded slightly and slowly walked down the arena. As expected of the number 1 genius of the Undying Altar in the Netherworld realm. What terrifying battle strength! Everyone below the arena looked at Shueisha with fear. Moreover, everyone began to compare Shueisha and Wenjua. If the two of them were to fight, who would be stronger? Thump, thump, thump. Shueisha walked down the arena and went straight to Zhuowen's side. He passed by without stopping. However, the moment they passed each other, Shueisha sent a secret voice-sending message to Zhuowen. "I'm looking forward to seeing how many moves you can take from me if we meet each other." Zhuowen only smiled faintly and did not reply. Or rather, he did not take Shueisha's words seriously at all. However, Shueisha's move just now made Zhuowen a little surprised, because he could faintly feel that the law that Shueisha grasped was somewhat similar to the law of death that he grasped. "I've always heard that the Netherworld realm worships death. It seems that Shueisha has grasped the law of death." Zhuowen muttered to himself. Number 15 Wenjua. Chao Rong shouted again, and Zhuowen leaped onto the stage again. However, His opponent immediately cowered and forfeited the battle. Now Zhuowen was publicly recognized as a ruthless person in the 7th arena. He could even kill an invincible emperor lord with a punch. Other than a few people in the 7th arena, the rest did not have the courage to face Zhuowen. In the next 10 matches, Zhuowen won very easily. The opponents he chose basically all forfeited immediately, so Zhuowen directly reached a 90-win streak. Number 15. Wen Zhuo against number 54, Zheng Tang. It was Zhuowen's turn again for the 91st match. However, when Qiao Rong made the announcement, many people below the arena fell silent. The scene of Wu Lan being killed by Zhuowen with a single punch was still vivid in everyone's mind. Zheng Tang was Wu Lan's senior brother. Now that the two of them met, the surrounding atmosphere immediately became a little strange. Zheng Tang's face was a little purple, and his eyes flickered. Speaking of which, when he looked at the young man in front of him, the scene of Wu Lan's death naturally appeared in his mind. However, Zheng Tang was a little unwilling to forfeit immediately, so he decided to throw down a few harsh words first before forfeiting. Wen Zhuo, you killed my Blue Dragon Hall's people. You might be safe in the 9 Netherworld Assembly now, but when the 9 Netherworld Assembly ends, it will be your death. Also, don't have any thoughts of getting lucky. In the 9 Netherworld realm, our Blue Dragon Hall is the strongest force. Even if you escape to the ends of the earth, you will still be wanted by our Blue Dragon Hall and be captured. Zheng Tang stood proudly. Perhaps because he was relying on the name of the Blue Dragon Hall behind him, he was not as afraid as he was at the beginning when he faced Zhuowen. After all, the Blue Dragon Hall was a colossus, and Wen Zhuo was just a small wandering cultivator. However, Zhuowen did not pay attention to Zheng Tang at all. He turned his head to look at Qiao Rong and said indifferently, "We've stood on the arena for long enough. We should start now, right?" Qiao Rong was startled, then revealed a playful smile and said, "Of course we can start." As soon as he finished speaking, Zhuowen took a stride forward, and he shot violently towards Zheng Tang like an ethereal wisp of smoke. Zheng Tang did not even have time to react, and was stunned on the spot. When he saw Zhuowen rushing towards him without any restraint, especially when he saw the dense killing intent in the latter's eyes, extreme fear rose in his heart. Of course, his battle instincts made Zheng Tang release the law of wood at the first moment and surround his body. "I forfeit." The intense fear caused Zheng Tang's mind to go blank. The scene of Wu Lan's death constantly reverberated in Zheng Tang's mind, causing his body to stiffen. However, before Zheng Tang could finish his words, he felt something coming from his chest. Then, he was shocked to discover that a fist had unknowingly landed in front of his chest. Puffed! Zheng Tang spat out a mouthful of blood. He felt as if his internal organs were being overturned, and the blood in his body flowed in reverse. He even had great doubts in his heart. Wen Zhuo was clearly dozens of meters away, so how did the latter arrive in front of him in the blink of an eye? "I forfeit, I forfeit." Zheng Tang did not care about his face as he screamed. The fear of death filled his entire mind, and he did not hesitate to shout out the words he felt ashamed of before. "You've lost." Zhuowen completely ignored Zheng Tang's screams. The law of fire spread from his fist and entered Zheng Tang's body. With a miserable howl, Zheng Tang's body was wrapped in 9-colored flames. When the howl came to an abrupt end, Zheng Tang disappeared, leaving behind a pile of black ashes. Hiss! Hiss! Chapter 1471. Yang Yin. Below the stage, Shueisha, who was watching the show, also frowned. Just now, the scene that happened in the arena was really strange. Zheng Tang was clearly going to forfeit, and Wen Zhuo was dozens of meters away from Zheng Tang. But in the blink of an eye, he appeared in front of Zheng Tang as if he had teleported. His speed was so fast that Zheng Tang didn't even have time to forfeit. "Did he use laws just now?" Shueisha murmured. Zhuowen's teleportation had only happened in an instant, and the fluctuation of laws was very weak, so he couldn't be sure. On the square platform of the Dragon Underworld, Qing Yuan narrowed his eyes. Although he appeared to be extremely shocked, his heart was burning with rage. The laws of the void. As expected, he's that little bastard Zhuowen. Sapphire Shore was 100% sure that when Zhuo on the 7th stage was the Zhuowen he had been searching for. However, Sapphire Shore didn't say anything. Even if 2 core disciples of the Blue Dragon Hall were killed, he didn't reveal Zhuowen's background. 100 wins in a row. A loud shout sounded in the natural world, and everyone's gazes gathered on the first stage. Over there, a figure stood proudly like a pine tree. A huge illusory dragon figure lingered on the surface of this figure. Many loud and clear dragon roars continuously resounded. Blue Dragon Hall's Qing Longzi. He's the first to obtain 100 wins in a row. Qing Longzi's eyes were calm as he faced the gazes of the crowd. His cultivation was undoubtedly first among all the participants in the 9 nether meet. He was able to reach the 2nd profound nirvana saint realm at such a young age. Qing Longzi slowly walked down the stage, but his body stiffened as soon as he landed. Qing Longzi, be careful of Wen Zhuo in the 3rd stage. A deep voice echoed in Qing Longzi's mind. The latter frowned slightly in astonishment. It's Zhuowen? Qing Longzi's gaze shifted slightly and landed on the 7th arena, where Wen Zhuo suddenly stood. His expression started to become cautious. But at the same time, in addition to being cautious, there was also a hint of fanaticism. 2 years ago, the news of the 6 sages joining forces had shaken the entire 9th netherworld realm. The main character of this matter was a young man called Zhuowen, and he possessed a legendary immortal saint artifact that caused everyone in the 9th hell realm to seethe with excitement. However, he's only a half-saint. If it wasn't for his celestial saint artifact, he wouldn't be a match for me, Qing Longzi said cautiously. It's best to be careful. That child's strength cannot be judged based on his cultivation base. Furthermore, his immortal sacred artifact is very powerful. However, that child would not dare to take out that item for now. Let's proceed according to the original plan. Qing Yuan transmitted his voice calmly, his tone full of confidence. Qing Longzi nodded. However, he paid more attention to Wen Zhuo in his heart. The deaths of Zheng Tang and Wu Lan thoroughly spread the name of Zhuowen as a ruthless person, and Zhuowen also smoothly obtained the 91st victory. In the remaining 3 victories, Zhuowen's opponents were basically scared out of their wits. Even before Chao Rong said start, they were already shouting and forfeiting. Zheng Tang's death had left a shadow in everyone's heart. They were afraid that they would be killed if they spoke too late. In the 95th battle, Zhuowen met the rogue cultivator Yang Yan. What surprised Zhuowen was that Yang Yan did not forfeit directly because of Zheng Tang and Wu Lan's deaths. Instead, he was filled with fighting spirit. You're not afraid of death? Standing on the opposite side of the arena, Zhuowen asked in amusement. However, Yang Yan shook his head and said, since you've embarked on the path of martial arts, you must have the heart to die. If you're afraid of death and cower in fear, how can you continue on the path of martial arts? Heart to die. Zhuowen was startled but soon laughed out loud. Without a doubt, this rogue cultivator before him was very interesting. Moreover, his heart of martial arts was extremely firm. It was no wonder that Yang Yan could cultivate to the level of an unrivaled sovereign lord despite being a rogue cultivator. Make a move first. Otherwise, you won't have a chance later, Zhuowen said indifferently. There was no doubt that Zhuowen's words were very arrogant, but Yang Yan did not think so. He even felt that Zhuowen's words were giving him a chance to make a move. Up until now, no one had been able to withstand more than one move from this young man in front of him. Even Wu Lan and Zheng Tang, who were also unrivaled sovereign lords, couldn't do it. As for Yang Yan, he was only an unrivaled sovereign lord. The fact that Zhuowen allowed him to make the first move was already giving him the best chance. Then you'll have to be careful. Yang Yan took a deep breath, and the aura of law swept out from his body. Zhuowen revealed a trace of interest. In the previous battle, Yang Yan had never used his own power of law, so he had no idea what kind of law the latter had comprehended. Hell! Yang Yan softly exhaled, before the entire arena began to tremble. Soon after, a pitch-black fog enveloped the entire arena. This is. Looking at the tragic scenes that appeared around him, Zhuowen's eyes revealed a look of surprise. These scenes were extremely tragic. There were tongues being pulled out, mountains of knives, seas of fire, stone pressure, pots of oil. There were all kinds of torture. If someone with a weak will saw such a tragic scene at first glance, their legs would definitely go soft, and their heart would be filled with fear. When these scenes gradually disappeared, Zhuowen found that there were countless mountains of knives in front of him, and there were countless blades under his feet. Mountain of Knives Hell. A low voice entered his ears, and then the blades under his feet began to surge, piercing through Zhuowen's feet and through his head. An intense pain spread from his feet to his entire body. Even though Zhuowen knew that this was an illusion, he still broke out in a cold sweat. What kind of law is this? The scene inside shows the underworld? Zhuowen revealed a strange expression. It's an extremely special law, called the Law of Hell. To be able to comprehend this law, a cultivator needs to have an extremely strong will. Xiao Hei's solemn voice rang out as he continued. Because the prerequisite for a cultivator who wants to comprehend this kind of law is to experience all the torture from the first floor to the 18th floor. Only then are they qualified. Zhuowen's heart moved. The 18 levels of hell, each level down, the torture became more and more tragic. Just looking at it was enough to make one's scalp tingle, let alone experiencing it. Although the torture formed by the law of hell was an illusion, the pain was real. Desolation. Zhuowen was not afraid. He clenched his right hand, and the law of desolation gathered, forming a black ball the size of a palm. He slammed his right hand on the ground, and the aura of desolation spread out. Under the erosion of the power of desolation, the entire mountain of knives hell was turned into nothingness. Desolation could turn everything into nothingness. Whether it was living or dead, under the influence of desolation, everything would turn into nothingness. Zhuowen strolled leisurely. Starting from the first level of hell, he went down level by level. Under his control, the law of desolation made everything desolate. When the 18th level was completely withered under the effect of the law of desolation, the law of hell that lingered around the arena shattered inch by inch like glass. The law of hell. This Yang Yan is just a small wandering cultivator. How can he comprehend such a powerful law? The moment Yang Yan released the law of hell, it immediately attracted the attention of countless spectating faction leaders around the 9th Underworld Sky platform. Even the cultivators below the 7th arena were affected by the law of hell. Some people with weak wills started shouting, but fortunately, they were stopped by the cultivators beside them. This Yang Yan is stronger than Zheng Tang and Wu Lan. I'm afraid he can make Wenjue look a little more miserable. Chao Rong floated quietly at the edge of the arena, a look of admiration in his eyes. Although Yang Yan's law was very special, he still did not think that Yang Yan would win. He would only obstruct Zhuowen to a certain extent. Break! An indifferent voice sounded around the arena. Then the barrier formed by the law of hell shattered. Puchi! Yang Yan spat out a mouthful of blood and retreated to the edge of the arena with a bitter smile on his face. The black fog gradually dissipated, and a figure stood proudly. His gaze fell on Yang Yan as he said indifferently, "Do you still want to fight?" Hearing this, Yang Yan's bitter smile deepened as he said in a low voice, "You win." After he finished speaking, he jumped down in a straightforward manner. This Yang Yan is not bad. His will is as strong as iron. If he doesn't fall, and becomes a saint by relying on the law of hell, he will definitely not be an ordinary saint. Xiao Hei's voice gradually sounded. Zhuowen nodded. This Yang Yan was indeed not bad. If there was a chance, he was willing to rope Yang Yan into Ryuka. However, he was not in a hurry. With Yang Yan's points, entering the top 100 of the second round was not a problem. Moreover, from the confrontation just now, Zhuowen could also tell that this Yang Yan was a proud and arrogant fellow. If he directly proposed the terms of roping him in, the latter would definitely reject him. This kind of thing had to be done at the right time. In the 97th round, Zhuowen met Shi from the League of Assassins. Shi was extremely cautious. With his assassin's intuition, he could feel the hidden killing intent in Zhuowen's eyes. Therefore, before Chao Rong's announcement, he decisively forfeited and did not plan to fight with Zhuowen. After all, The second round of the arena used a point system. Losing a few rounds would not hinder one from entering the third round. In the 98th and 99th rounds, Zhuowen met characters who were just there for show. It was very easy for him to advance. Number 15 Wenjue against number 7 Shueisha. Chao Rong announced again. Then the seventh arena fell into silence. Surprisingly, everyone's gaze landed on Zhuowen and Shueisha. Shueisha, the number 1 genius of the Undying Altar in the Netherworld realm. His cultivation was at the half-step saint realm, and the law he comprehended was the extremely rare law of death. Wenjue was a dark horse that had suddenly appeared in the 7th arena. He had been rising steadily since the first match. Even the invincible sovereign lords Wu Lan and Zheng Tang were killed with a single punch. His cultivation base was undoubtedly at the half-step saint realm. Both of them also maintained the record of consecutive victories. Now that they met, they would compete for the spot of 100 consecutive victories. Previously, many people below the arena had compared the two, and the conclusion was that it was hard to say who would win and who would lose. Come up. Shueisha jumped up and stood in the middle of the arena, looking down at Zhuowen with a provocative gaze. You don't seem to be qualified to look down on me, right? Chapter 1472. Eyes of Death. Where did this Wenjue come from? He's actually so strong. On the square platform where the Undying Altar was, the Undying Old Monster narrowed his eyes. Shueisha was the number 1 genius of the Undying Altar, so the Undying Old Monster paid close attention to the 7th arena. In the Undying Old Monster's opinion, it shouldn't be a surprise that Shueisha obtained 100 consecutive victories, but the sudden appearance of Wenjue made the Undying Old Monster feel a trace of threat. He was also a half-saint, and he could kill an invincible sovereign lord with one punch. His strength was infinitely close to Shueisha's. It could be said that Wenjue was definitely Shueisha's greatest opponent this time. Lord Undying, don't worry. Shueisha's abilities were all inherited from you, Undying Old Monster. Although Wenjue's strength is extraordinary, it's still not enough to face Shueisha. Beside the Undying Old Monster, the Elder of the Undying Altar kept talking without any worry on his face. After all, Shueisha wasn't an ordinary half-saint. In the eyes of the Elders of the Undying Altar, it was impossible for Zhuowen to be Shueisha's opponent. The Undying Old Monster nodded. Shueisha was a genius nurtured by the Undying Altar, and he had a lot of trump cards. He didn't think that Shueisha would lose to Wenjue because of this. The moment Zhuowen and Shueisha clashed, countless people's gazes gathered on them. At this moment, many of the arena battles had already ended, and the contestants with 100 consecutive victories were looking at the 7th arena with interest. This Wenjue's strength is extraordinary. I wonder if he can win against Shueisha? The flower fairy of the 100-flower garden in the flower nether realm had a graceful figure among the flowers, and her laughter was crisp and pleasant like a silver bell. Many of the surrounding cultivators were absent-minded, and their eyes were filled with infatuation. No, Shazi replied coldly. I also don't think so. Although Shueisha's cultivation is only a half-saint, his power of law is extremely powerful. Ordinary profound sky saints probably can't do anything to him. Yiksha, whose body was surrounded by countless waves, laughed coldly, and his voice was extremely sinister and terrifying. Although the other top geniuses of the Netherworld realm didn't say anything, it was obvious from their expressions that they were more inclined towards Shueisha. As the number 1 genius of the Nether realm, they had sparred before, so they knew how powerful each other was. It was precisely because they knew Shueisha's background that they were so certain of his victory. Yang Yi leaned lazily on the edge of the arena. He was surrounded by several junior brothers and sisters of the academy. His gaze landed lazily on Wenjue, revealing a faintly discernible smile. His strength is not bad. He can actually maintain a 99-win streak. Shueisha stood proudly and continued. However, your winning streak will end very soon. It will be ended by me. Zhuowen glanced indifferently at Shueisha, then looked at Chao Rong and said, Senior Chao Rong, I don't want to listen to your nonsense. Let's start quickly. As soon as these words came out, Shuai's face stiffened. Soon after, veins appeared in his eyes. That was a sign of anger. This Wenjue was really too much. He actually dared to say that he was spouting nonsense in front of him. It was very obvious that he did not put him in his eyes at all. Let's start, Chao Rong said indifferently. Speaking of which, he also wanted to see what kind of sparks would fly between these two geniuses, who were both half-saint cultivations. Especially Wenjue, who had not been able to see his exact cultivation before. It was only during the battle that he completely sensed the aura of his true cultivation. It was very obvious that Wenjue had cultivated an incredible concealment secret technique. Even a heavenly saint like him had been fooled by him at the beginning. In addition to the powerful fighting strength that Wenjue had displayed, it caused Chao Rong to be extremely interested in this unremarkable individual cultivator. Swoosh. As soon as Chao Rong spoke, Shuai moved. His movements were extremely swift. Like a cunning rabbit, he rushed over and arrived in front of Zhuowen in an instant. You're not going to use the power of laws? Zhuowen stood quietly on the spot. He raised his head slightly and looked at Shuai, who was almost within reach. Do I need the power of laws to deal with you? As Shuai spoke, he threw a punch fiercely towards Zhuowen's head. Then don't regret it. Zhuowen grinned and also threw a punch. This punch had extremely obvious traces of golden veins on the surface of his fist. A vast aura spread out. Boom! As the two fists collided, there was a thunderous sound. Then, Shuai retreated dozens of steps, while Zhuowen did not move at all. What a terrifying monstrous strength! Shuai's eyes were filled with fear. He stared at Zhuowen in astonishment. He really could not figure out why the physical body of the young man in front of him was so terrifying. Shuai is at a disadvantage? In the eyes of the others, this scene made them feel complicated. I can't be careless. Shuai's eyes became cautious. He gently swung his right hand, and his slightly twisted wrist began to gradually recover. Death! Shuai bellowed, and the aura of death spread out. Then, a huge shadow of the Grim Reaper appeared behind him. The Death God shadow was tall and big. It wore a hooded black windbreaker and held a black sickle that was several feet long. As soon as the death law was released, Shuai's right foot stomped on the ground. A terrifying force spread out, and the ground under his feet suddenly cracked. Swoosh! Shuai was like an arrow that left the bow. He rushed out and threw out another punch. This punch was condensed with a vast amount of death intent. The strong death intent spread out, and even affected many of the surrounding martial artists, making them feel a sense of fear in the face of death. Desolation. Zhuowen was not to be outdone. Waves of desolation power spread out, as if it could turn everything in the world into a wasteland. This desolation power condensed in Zhuowen's palm, and formed a small black ball. The moment Shuai rushed over, Zhuowen pushed out his palm, and pressed it in front of Shuai. Boom! The two powers of desolation and death collided. Gray and black almost filled the entire arena. Then, the huge arena began to age like a withered flower. Finally, it collapsed inch by inch and turned into dust. Swoosh swoosh. The moment the arena shattered, two figures retreated from the two sides of the ruins and floated in the air. The aftermath turned into airwaves and spread out in all directions. The martial artists in the seventh arena could not help but step back with fear in their eyes. In the air, Shuai and Zhuowen faced each other from a distance. Their fighting spirit soared. Your strength is not bad. The power of the desolation law is also very strong. Unfortunately, the death law that I have comprehended is more powerful than your desolation law. Shuai's mouth was full of mockery. In terms of laws, the death law was indeed more powerful than the desolation law. So what? The one who will lose in the end is still you. Zhuowen did not bother with Shuai. He clenched his right hand, and the desolation law rolled out, and condensed into a large spear. Swoosh! Zhuowen stood with the spear in his hand. His right foot stepped on the void. His entire body was like a puff of green smoke as he rushed out. With a swing of the spear, the terrifying desolation law spread out, causing the space to distort. Shuai was not to be outdone. He stretched out his right hand, and the death god shadow behind him roared. Like a shadow, it enveloped Shueisha. Suddenly, Shueisha's entire body was filled with the aura of death. The death god shadow was like a coat that covered Shueisha's body, causing his aura to soar to the extreme. Die! Shueisha roared and slashed out with the death god scythe. The blade spewed out a black light that seemed to have substance. It rushed out from the void and slashed in front of Zhuowen. Zhuowen's eyes were cold. He spun the desolation spear in his hand, and a gray desolation law spread out. Boom! The two weapons collided and a gray mushroom cloud of energy burst out. The aftermath was like a ripple that spread out in all directions, causing the surrounding space to distort and become unstable. Bang! 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 Both of them retreated dozens of steps. Then, not to be outdone, they shouted and stomped their feet. Like a whirlwind, the two of them intertwined again. The power of the two laws of desolation and death intertwined, erupting with an extremely mysterious fluctuation. This fluctuation spread out and set off an endless wave of air. The people around the arena were all forced back by this wave of air. Some cultivators who were not strong enough even spat out a mouthful of blood under this wave of air. Their faces turned as pale as snow. What a terrifying power of law! The battle between the two of them. Not only the other cultivators in the 7th arena, but even the cultivators in the other arenas in the natural world were stunned. Their gazes fell on the two figures that were constantly intertwining. Because the two of them were moving so fast, some people could not even see the exact trajectory of the two. They could only tell that the battle between the two of them was extremely fierce and terrifying from the fluctuations produced by their collision. The Flower Fairy, Shazi Yiksha, and the other top geniuses of the underworld, who had evaluated Zhuowen and Shueisha, were also stunned. Looks like Wenjue is not simple. He has comprehended the law of desolation. Even Shueisha's law of death could not suppress him. The Flower Fairy giggled and let out a bell-like laugh. Her beautiful eyes stared at Wenjue with curiosity and interest. Bang! There was another muffled sound. Shueisha and Zhuowen both retreated dozens of steps and faced each other from a distance. Shueisha's eyes were solemn as he said in a deep voice, "Looks like you did not use your full strength before. It's really rare that the law of desolation can exert such great power on you. However, the battle between us will end soon." As he spoke, the law of death on Shueisha's body began to surge, and a shocking black light burst out from between his eyebrows. Death sigh. As he spoke, a crack appeared between Shueisha's eyebrows, and a black pupil emerged from the crack. The moment the death sigh cracked, the law of death around Shueisha began to boil and gathered in the black pupil between his eyebrows. Whoosh! Chapter 1473. Daytime Golden Wheel. This dark ray of light contained an extremely powerful death intent. It could be said that this ray of light condensed the essence of the law of death. The dense death intent seemed to be able to immerse all living beings in a kingdom of death. A trace of extreme fear rose in Zhuowen's mind. This fear was like a cloud that lingered in his heart, causing his hair to stand on end and cold sweat to drip down his forehead. Boom! Zhuowen was not afraid. As someone who had also comprehended the law of death, his fear of death was much lower than others. He swung his right hand, and the desolation spear spun at high speed. The law of desolation was like maggots that lingered on the surface of the spear. Wherever the spear passed, even space seemed to become desolate and distorted. Boom! The desolation spear collided with the death ray. Immediately, the desolation spear in Zhuowen's hand crumbled. This, Zhuowen's pupils shrank. He did not expect the death ray to be so terrifying. The desolation spear could not resist at all. This death's eye is probably Shueisha's armor soul. Retreat immediately. The moment the desolation spear was destroyed, Zhuowen pushed off with his right foot. Like a rock spreading its wings, he leapt into the air and retreated. Humph! Zhuowen snorted coldly. With a thought, the death ray turned around like a living creature and continued to rush towards Zhuowen. Zhuowen's expression changed slightly. He suddenly threw out his right fist. The law of desolation condensed on his fist. Immediately, a gray mark lit up on the surface of his fist. The aura of desolation became even more terrifying. Rumble. The huge fist slammed into the death ray. Immediately after, a muffled thunderous sound erupted. Then, with Zhuowen as the center, the space several hundred feet around him turned into a vacuum. At the edge of this space, it collapsed like shattered glass. Many martial artists below the arena were dumbfounded by what they saw. Bang! A muffled sound rang out once again, as Zhuowen took a few steps back. The death ray had also completely exploded under the attack of his fist. Damn it! This guy can actually break the death ray of the death ray? The law of desolation shouldn't be this powerful. Shueisha was finally slightly shocked. Theoretically speaking, the might of the law of desolation was lower than the law of death. Moreover, Wenju's cultivation was the same as his, a half-saint. When the two great laws collided, the law of death should have gained the upper hand. However, the current situation surprised Shueisha. What Shueisha didn't know was that the desolation law that Zhuowen had used just now was combined with a part of the holy body's power to have such a powerful increase. Otherwise, the law of desolation alone would not be a match for the law of death. I don't believe you can keep blocking the death ray. Shueisha's gaze was cold and gloomy. His eyes of death blinked repeatedly, and actually shot out 3 beams of death light in an instant. The power displayed by each death ray was much more terrifying than the previous one. Zhuowen's eyelids twitched slightly, but he was not afraid. He punched out again and again, smashing on the 3 death rays. Bang bang bang. Although these 3 beams of death brought him even more powerful obstacles, he broke through them one by one without showing any signs of weakness. What? This guy? Shueisha exclaimed, his eyes filled with disbelief. Your eyes of death combined with the law of death is indeed terrifying, but it's still a little lacking when compared to me. While Shueisha was in a daze, an indifferent voice could be heard coming from behind him like a ghost. You, suddenly turning around. Shueisha's pupils shrunk when he realized that Zhuowen was already standing behind him. Die! Zhuowen did not give Shueisha a chance to speak. His fist came at a tricky angle and violently punched towards Shueisha's heart. Bastard, you're not qualified to kill me, Shueisha shouted, and a terrifying holy aura burst out from his body. Immediately after, a blazing golden light gushed out from the back of his head. The golden light began to wriggle and gather, turning into a golden ring. Ding! Zhuowen's fist came and hit the golden ring. Immediately, the crisp sound of metal clashing resounded. Dang! 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 Zhuowen staggered and retreated dozens of steps. His eyes became somewhat solemn as he said, "Profound saint artifact." The saint aura emanating from the surface of the golden ring that floated above Shueisha's head was too blazing and majestic. Even Zhuowen could not help but take a step back. It's actually a profound saint artifact. Sure enough, the top genius of the nether realm is not easy to deal with. Looking at the golden ring above Shueisha's head, many cultivators below the arena were envious. Profound saint artifacts were rare in the 9 nether realm. Even some profound saint realm saints might not necessarily have a profound saint artifact. Shueisha was only a half-step saint, but he had a profound saint artifact. This was definitely a great fortune. However, Shueisha was the top genius of the undying sacred altar in the nether realm. He was the focus of the undying old freak, so it was understandable that he would take out a profound saint artifact to save Shueisha's life. He forced Shueisha to use his profound saint artifact. When Zhuo's death was worth it. On the square platform of the nether realm, the undying old freak's eyes were indifferent, but his heart was not calm. Shueisha was considered to be one of the top geniuses of the younger generation in the 9 nether realm. He should have won 100 consecutive victories in the 7th arena. But now a dark horse like Zhuo had appeared. The undying old freak's mood was quite gloomy. After all, the profound saint artifact was Shueisha's life-saving treasure. He would not use it unless he had no other choice. Profound saint artifact daytime golden wheel. Shueisha raised his right hand and grabbed the daytime golden wheel in his hand. Suddenly, an extremely dazzling golden light burst out from the center of the golden wheel. The golden light continued to converge, and finally condensed into a small sun that was suspended above Shueisha's head. Looks like Shueisha is going to win. The flower fairy giggled, revealing a charming look in her beautiful eyes. And this kid is definitely going to die, Shazi said in an extremely cold voice. Hee, with Shueisha's character, it is indeed possible for him to kill this kid. Yiksha licked his lips and said indifferently. Wrong, 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 all of you are wrong. Just as the flower fairy and the other two were discussing whether Zhuowen would die, an untimely voice interrupted their conversation. Wrong. Why do you say that, Brother Yang Yi? Do you still think that when Zhuo can defeat Shueisha, who has the daytime golden wheel? The flower fairy's beautiful eyes flickered. Although she was giggling, her face showed that she did not care. Obviously, she did not believe Yang Yi's words. Shazi and Yiksha glanced at Yang Yi with fear, and then sneered together. Brother Yang Yi, you are a little old. Shueisha has the strength of a half-saint and a profound saint artifact. Can't he kill a half-saint warrior? Yang Yi glanced at Shazi and Yiksha indifferently and said, What I want to say is that not only will Wenzhuo win, but he will also kill Shueisha. As soon as these words came out, the faces of the flower fairy and the other two stiffened. They even thought that there was something wrong with their ears. Brother Yang Yi, are you joking with us? The flower fairy came back to her senses and said indifferently. Shazi and Yiksha's faces did not look good. Obviously, they also thought that Yang Yi was joking with them. Joking? Yang Yi never joke. Since you don't believe me, then forget it. I will sleep for a while. Yang Yi yawned, and then leaned on the stone pillar behind him and took a nap. The flower fairy and the other two looked at each other speechlessly. You are dead meat. Shueisha's face was ferocious. With the daytime golden wheel in his hand, and the blazing golden sun above his head, he took a step forward and pressed down with his right hand. A terrifying saint aura, as if it was real, rumbled and crushed on Zhuowen. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes when he felt the terrifying saint aura. He flicked his right hand and took out a long spear. The body of the spear was painted with the patterns of the sun, moon, and stars, and the surface of the spear blade was covered with many green lines. The same saint aura slanted and resisted the saint aura of Shueisha's daytime golden wheel. Saint aura? You also have a mystic saint artifact? Shueisha exclaimed, his eyes filled with disbelief. He had a mystic saint artifact because of the undying altar. However, when Zhuo was just a rogue cultivator, how could he have the chance to have a mystic saint artifact? This was truly inconceivable. Not only Shueisha, but the countless spectators around the 9th Underworld Sky platform were also shocked. A rogue cultivator actually had a mystic saint artifact. It was really worthy of consideration and suspicion. Mystic saint artifact, 9 stars 8 trigram spear. After saying that, Zhuowen did not waste any more time. He stomped his right foot on the ground and rushed out like a hurricane towards Shueisha. Zhuowen waved his long spear, and suddenly, the sun, moon, and stars appeared around him. His saint aura was vast and mighty, and its power was enough to shatter heaven and earth. Boom! 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 The 9 stars 8 trigram spear collided with the daytime golden wheel. The saint aura spread out, and there was an earth-shattering explosion. The surrounding space cracked inch by inch, forming a terrifying black hole. Boom! Boom! After the explosion, a figure flew out in a sorry state. He only managed to stabilize himself after flying for a few hundred meters. When the crowd looked over, they were shocked to find that the figure that flew out was none other than Shueisha. Swoosh! The moment Shueisha stabilized himself, a figure stomped his feet in the air and shot out like an arrow. The long spear in his hand exploded with the illusion of the sun, moon, and stars. Break! Zhuowen arrived in front of Shueisha. He held the 9 stars 8 trigram spear tightly in his right hand and smashed it down. Shueisha was horrified when he saw that. He raised his hands and tried to block the attack. Boom! When the 9 stars 8 trigram spear came into contact with the daytime golden wheel, Shueisha groaned. He was smashed to the ground by a powerful force, and a deep pit was formed. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.